That's right.
Oh, it switches on. Is that
Did you flip it a swoosh?
I put it on.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Board of Selectmen meeting Monday, February 26, 2018. This evening, the first item on our agenda is executive session. So we will be, the meeting is now open. We'll be going immediately into executive session and coming back into open session. So at this time, the board will entertain a motion for the board to go into executive session.
Move the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30, subsection 21A, Clause 3, to go into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the town's unions, since an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the board, and to convene an open session thereafter.
Second.
Moving second, requires a roll call vote. Ms. Lady?
Aye.
Capper?
Aye.
Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Chairs in favor, so it's unanimous. So we are now in executive session, folks. We will be back live as soon as we reconvene. Thank you. Pledge. After we let the people file in.
Thanks, Ann.
And thank you all.
Yeah, good work.
We got training.
Oh, is that what you want?
I have to consult it.
We did.
Pass them this around to sign them for the bonds. This
I
area,
want it done before you
this area.
get out.
You're not going to say no, huh?
Steve, you put it in front of me. I trust that it was done correctly. Sign that, Joe. Signature from you guys. These are for bonds. Good evening, folks. We are back from executive session. We just have a little bit of housekeeping we have to do. We'll be going live in just a couple of minutes. We are live, but it'll be...
I don't think so.
Hey, Chili Willy.
You cold?
Chili Willy and Elmer Fudd, we have everything.
All the cartoon characters.
Oh,
72.
Is it? Could you give me a quilt?
You're on 74.
Great, Jack.
Is this for the sauna?
You put some water on the rocks.
this is fun. Makes the meetings go faster. You turn that on.
Oh, man.
If you don't meet with a certain time, the seats.
Yeah. It's not a bad idea.
Where is... Hey, can you forward me the agenda,
Packet, yeah. Okay, so we are back from executive session, back into open session. And as we always do, we'd like to open with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Clerk, if you can lead us, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk. Okay, so for our agenda this evening, at 6:40, we have some appointments to do, interviews and appointments. Town boards and departments. At 7:25, be an opportunity for public input and member updates. If you do plan on offering any public input, just ask that you will identify yourself,
give us your street address, and any comments should come through the chair. Appreciate that. At 7:30, we have our annual and special town meeting article insertion. And at 8:30, we have our town administrator, assistant town administrator updates. We have a couple items on that. The Green Communities Year 3 grant applications, which is some good news there. And also our Magic Subregion AARP age-friendly region application. So just took a vote on that tonight. So, I guess I didn't mention reading mail. Mr. Bergman, if you could take us away.
Take
Thank you.
the mail packet, Mr. Chairman. First, we have a letter from the Littleton Water Commissioners. It's their letter to the Town of Concord Water Commissioners, wherein our commissioners exercise, put Concord on notice that they're exercising Littleton's rights under, for Nagog Pond as a water supply pursuant to a 1848 statute. That letter is in the agenda packet for tonight, so you can take a look at it. This, by the way, was an issue, it had come up, there were 2 petitioned articles at town meeting in May, and the commissioners agreed that they would take up the matter. Both of the articles were pulled by the petitioner, but the commissioner said that they would take a look at them, and they have done that. And next we have a letter that we've received from the Littleton Country Gardeners offering to do some improvement in the courtyard around the town offices, so we appreciated that information and that offer. From the Parks and Recreation Department, we have a notification that our department has been certified for membership with U.S. Sailing, and we've got this membership certificate, so congratulations to Park and Rec for their work on that. We received several communications regarding the Neshoba Valley Tech High School District Rep position. First, that the term of our incumbent, Charlie Ellis, expires at the end of March. It is necessary for an appointment to be made for the next 3-year term, and the procedure that we've long followed is that a committee comprised of the town moderator, the school committee, and the Board of Selectmen is the appointing authority for our rep. So the schools have typically hosted that meeting. They've offered to hold it on the 22nd of March, which is a Thursday night. The Thursday night of a school committee meeting happens to be the night they're going to have their budget hearing. The moderator is available, and so we're posting a notice that folks who are interested in applying can do so by a deadline in the notice that your team can interview and make the appointment. But we also do have the application from the incumbent seeking reappointment. Next, just a couple of things I wanted to put in. A couple of meetings later this week, the Westford Business Association is having a forum where they've invited town administrators from the immediate area, myself, Steve Ledoux from Acton, the manager in Chelmsford, as well as the manager in Westford, Jody Ross. So we'll be going to make. I was asked to do it and did so 3 years ago, and it is moderated by a editor of the Lowell Sun, and it's going to be a Juniper in Westford. Friday, and dare I say, weather permitting, the 495 Metro West Partnership is holding its annual meeting. It's in I mentioned this last time. It's in Middleborough, and the governor and our Congresswoman Nikki Sonkus are featured speakers. Lastly, you received this letter, but it was not in the packet. But I did want to call out during the meeting that you did get a letter from George Sanders. You don't write as often as you used to, George. You don't write us. So But, and he has requested that, that the board add citizen-at-large members to the Town Building and Space Needs Analysis Working Group that you established at your last meeting. And I know that George has been in touch with the chair about that. And,
Yeah, if I could, so there's, Mr. Sanders and I have had a number of conversations, as well as some conversations I've had with other members of the community, expressing the need for having some citizens at large as members of the town working group for the building and space needs. As it is right now, we've got a 12-member committee, and I would like to see us continue to work with the 12 folks that are on there, but open it up. And we can't take a vote or make any changes this evening because it was a vote by the board to seat the board, to seat the working group. But I would like to see if we could open it up, advertise, and add a couple of at-large members to the town Building and Space Needs Analysis Working Group, and just to make sure that we get all the input that we can. The difference between 12 people and 14 people, as far as a productive group, I don't think it'll have an ill effect at all. Quite to the contrary, I think it'll have a positive effect. So I would ask that the board entertain the opportunity to post for these positions, but we would have to, and then have an agended item at one of our meetings in order to change the makeup of that group, because we did actually vote on it at our last meeting. So, again, it's not agended, but
yeah, I
it
think,
is something.
procedurally, that you could, during this discussion now, you can just, you're allowed to do scheduling type things. You can say you want to have on your agenda for your next meeting, March 12th, a matter of the composition of that committee. And we'll put that on the agenda. Your policy requires that if you did create the positions to advertise for 4 weeks. And then the question, I think a logistical question would come is that since there are other members of the committee, some of whom have been appointed, others who are going to be, can the committee meet? Is everyone okay with that committee meeting in the meantime, or do you want to wait till you vote to amend the composition 2 weeks from tonight and then add other ones? It take, you could add a month to 6 weeks to when the committee could actually meet, if you.
I do believe,
Wait.
I think I'm a little disappointed in myself and for in the interest of time and to try to get something done. I think we were a little hasty here. I would like to try to at least start some of the early work of that committee if we could.
Sure. But I think if someone's really interested, they could be attending those meetings anyway.
Yes.
And then be signed on later on, so the committee starts working, interested citizens can go to the meeting.
So, I might make 3 points. One is, you mentioned there were, yeah,
Numbered points.
right, that there were 14 members, but I think we distinguish between who would be voting members and who are
Correct,
members of the.
absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Which
And
is the board members.
to that end, let's not lose sight of the fact that this is a, working group, so it's, not going to be, I mean, they'll be hopefully all posted public meetings that the public can participate in, but it's, sitting around a round table rather than a flat table, talking to a crowd type thing, getting work done. Now, I raised, very concerns that Mr. Sanders did, I think, when we made that appointment, just that we, by just keeping stakeholders as the only people with the voice in the process, it becomes a bit of an echo chamber, or runs the risk of being that. So my thought at the time was just that as long as we're mindful of that, I don't mind that those are the folks taking a whack at it. And to that end, I'm not opposed to the group that's been appointed going ahead and doing some of the preliminary work that doesn't have to close any doors or anything, just identify where deficiencies are, identify what further types of analysis need to be done, where we're short on information. And I certainly don't mind adding additional positions from the public on there, because I think that's addresses a structural fault to the process, in that if you only have people who are occupying one of these buildings, then you're only getting one set of perspectives on it.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah, so I agree. I mean, I'd like to certainly move forward just in And because of the time restraint, and we need, like we said, Mr. Bergman said we need to post a job, it's 4 weeks out, but I don't think there's any harm in moving forward in the interim, and convening the committee, and like Mr. Knox said, and Mr. Glavy, they're certainly welcome, if they're interested to come forward, it's going to be a public meeting, so.
Right, they wouldn't be able to vote, but they would
Right.
very much be able to be up to speed and see what was being discussed.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we good with, just from logistically?
Yep.
Now, are you able to post prior to us taking that vote, or? Look into that.
Let's talk about, it. We'll talk
talk?
about
All right.
that. Yeah, the safer step is to
Wait until we,
wait until you
Unless you
look
put a
at
caveat in there.
positions. Yeah.
okay.
Can I go back to the first mail item?
Please.
The letter from Sharon Corbett on behalf of the Country Gardens. What do you intend to follow up on that at all, Keith?
Yeah, in fact, we met with her
Okay,
and
good.
essentially gave her verbal go-ahead, but said, can you put it in writing so that we can, she was about to announce it at the Rotary Club meeting the next morning, and said, well, if you write it down today, we can get it to the selectmen, so that you know. So
And I'm
you
sure
got-
you had the presence.
So you got it on Tuesday,
okay.
and I wanted to have it in the packet tonight so that we, really can express our thanks and appreciation for the group that takes good care of us.
And while giving them the green light, I'm sure you also shared with them that everything they plant might get ripped up when we remodel. You haven't passed that message along yet?
Possibility exists.
Yeah, we'll try not to.
Well, I just don't want it to
We'll
be a
try not-
surprise,
yeah,
we do
We'll try not to
have,
plant where we're gonna
yeah.
dig it up.
Some plants move easier than others,
We won't- well-
Something with shallow roots,
Yeah, we
maybe.
won't put any perennials in.
Right, okay.
The only other item, I would just say that on the mail, the Neshoba Valley Tech appointee, Charlie Ellis, has done an excellent job.
Sure.
Keeping the school committee and us up to date. Went over there and he was kind enough to bring me on a small tour after we were over there with the governor doing our photo shoot with the governor. But he's doing a great job, and I would encourage all of us to attend that meeting and offer our support.
And Park and Rec is working with Charlie, through Charlie, to get their request, because they want to do their boathouse, the Long Lake Boathouse
True.
project, which
Yeah.
we can achieve significant savings at the cost of that if we can get it lined up through the tech.
Right.
So we're working on that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Bergman. All right, so we do have a couple of interviews for some vacancies that were created by some resignations by Ms. Kathleen Nolet and Susan Dunn. And so the Council on Aging has given their endorsement of Ms. Ann Lee Ellis and David Sill. So if
And in the end, we had a total of 2 applicants, right? I think at one point we had 3, one of them pulled out, so you have 2 applicants for 2 vacancies.
It's gonna be a tough interview. If you want to, if you're comfortable where you are, the mics will pick you up, but if you want to come up front, you're welcome to do so. And
We'll speak up.
perfect. Mr. Sill, just, if you could just let us know a little bit about yourself and your interest in being appointed to the.
My name is David Sill. I live at 53 Washington Drive. I've been a resident of Littleton since 1955. I'm a graduate of the high school. A couple people here in the room were there the same time I was.
I'm not that old now.
One over here hiding. But, you know, with everything going on, you know, that the Council on Aging has been asking for years, you know, for a space, more space. And I've kind of reached the age of 70 where I could call myself a senior citizen, so I have some time. And I just thought I'd like to volunteer and see if I could help out in any way. So that's pretty much the reason I'd like to do that.
Excellent. Well, thanks for stepping forward, David. Appreciate it. And you've certainly given time in other areas. And
Much appreciated. I'll open it up to any of the members if you have any questions or comments.
Just doing both at the same time?
Okay, we can do that.
I'm Ann Lee Ellis, and I live at 16 Elizabeth Street in Littleton. My husband is Charlie. And I know almost everybody except for you, Mr. DeCoste. I don't think I've ever met you, but everybody else I have met. This is new to me. I retired in June, and so I'm just getting into I've always been an elementary school teacher, so now I'm moving up a little and finally admitting that I am part of the senior citizen group. I also have my 92-year-old dad living with us, so that has brought it full course for me. I run the Littleton's Memory Cafe at the First Baptist Church once a month, and it's going beautifully. If you know anybody who has someone who's living with memory issues, please ask them to tell them to come see us. We have a great time every month. I also am interested in, obviously because of the Memory Cafe, the dementia issue, and wondering if Littleton is talking about it all, about being dementia-friendly as well as the age-friendly that's coming up. I went to a dementia-friendly quarterly meeting, state quarterly meeting a couple weeks ago, and Massachusetts is one of the few states in the country that is following along. Minnesota was the first to initiate this, and there are about 5 or 6 states that are following along under the Minnesota guidelines to become dementia-friendly, and that would include, courses, workshops for people from banks, businesses, libraries, to come in and find out what are the best ways to deal with folks with dementia issues, especially in the banking and money type issues. So I'm very interested in that also.
That's great.
I can't say that I stepped up. Marge caught me in the hallway upstairs and said, Ann Lee.
Well, thanks for not running the other way.
You gotta be faster.
Oh, so that's it.
Go, Ms. Lee.
I do have one question. I know both David and Neely for a long time, absolutely thrilled they're both looking to get involved. But David, you're on the library commissioners as well, correct? You're still on that,
And
right?
also, and also cable.
Okay, but a primary issue for both the library and the Council on Aging are their respective space needs. And while we all want it to work together, when you're at the Council on Aging, you ought to be advocating for the Council on Aging. When you're at the library, you ought to be advocating for the library. So I don't know how you square that, or whether there's any...
Well, it's all an issue of space,
Yeah.
okay? Everything is totally up in the air, okay? It's all up front. The library has a grant, COA needs space, and, I just, whatever I can do anywhere, all right? But that's
I'm just saying, potentially, we hope this group will reach a harmonious end product that everybody will agree on, but there may be points where what's in the interest of the Council on Aging short-term are opposed to what's in the interest of the library short-term or long-term, so.
Well, yeah, the Council on Aging is a 9-member group, so, they'll decide whatever.
It's the way we don't appoint people to 2 different regulatory boards at the same time, or people that are in positions to compete for, the same pot of money. So I'm just saying that this is something that needs to be considered. I mean, I don't have an objection to you being there, obviously, but those are 2 separate roles.
Yeah.
Could I just say something about that?
I had some similar thoughts. Please, Marge.
Marge Payne, Chair of the COA Board. In all respect to David, I really respect him. He came and spoke to me after he submitted his application and said, I saw how the COA worked with the planning board, and has worked effectively together. And it's my desire to try to support the library and the COA working together on the space issues. And I respect that. So I don't know, I think that he brought that up to me,
Yeah,
and I think that's a great way of looking at the whole issue, you know.
I think it's just important to get it out on the
I
table.
agree, but I just wanted you to know that, so, and he's right, we can outvote him. None of us, you know, but anyway, so, but that was, I just wanted to add that because he was upfront with it and, you know, talked about that right in the beginning.
That's fine. If you're thinking about it before the appointment, then you're already considering it, that's the important stuff. Because, I mean, it's going to come down the road.
Right.
Both departments could be advocating for their own needs. Hopefully, we'll all be advocating for a common plan, but there's a lot that happens between point A and point Z.
That's true, but we would hope that we can work together.
Thanks.
Well, I think that was a good question, Mr. Glavy, a legitimate concern, but I think given the situation and Mr. Sills taking the initiative to go forward and address that issue, I don't see any concern personally. I appreciate you coming forward, honestly, and volunteering for the board. And Ann Lee, I've known you for years. Ann Lee was my boy's preschool teacher, and she grew up down the street from me. So I love the dementia-friendly community idea, and that you've already looked into that and seen that as a concern. The Red Raven and Littleton acting as the Purple Table reservations to address concerns for people with dementia, I think is really important. And I love your idea about talking to people in the community, the banks, and at the food stores and et cetera, to help raise awareness about how they can deal with people in the community that have dementia. So I love it. My question was going to be fresh ideas, and I think you presented it. So thank you so much for stepping forward, and looking forward to seeing you work with the Council on Aging. Thank you.
Or at least not sidestepping. Mr. Knox?
Having known these two for a couple of years, we went to high school together. I know the character of them both, so I'm completely satisfied with the applications. And we have a reunion coming up. So.
We do.
So there's some volunteering going on. All right. Mr. Glade, I do appreciate you addressing the elephant in the room, because I think it was on the minds of all of us, and I think that putting it out there and being open about it. And David, I appreciate you going to Marge and discussing it and being open about it. And for me, your character is good enough for me. I think that you're a stand-up guy, and I don't anticipate it being a problem. So at this time, if we don't have any further discussion, I would entertain a motion to
Just
go ahead.
point of clarification, I think because these both have the same expiration date, one motion on both is okay in this one?
Yeah.
Okay, then I would move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Town Code, Chapter 15-1, to appoint Ann Lee Ellis and David Sills to terms on the Council on Aging, expiring June 30th, 2020.
Second. Moved and seconded, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Unanimous. Thank you very much. You do have to go up and get sworn in by Diane. You do have to go to the town clerk and get sworn in. Even if you've already been sworn into another board, you have to get sworn in for this. But, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Venuti, bond anticipation notes, otherwise known as bands.
We are rolling a $847,000 bond anticipation note for the water department. This is the third roll of this band that we're doing. It's an $870,000 project that the water department did. It was bringing the water main across to the point. So it's a betterment that'll be paid to those people who are benefiting from it. This will be maturing. It's a very short ban. It'll be maturing in May, and it'll be rolled into the fire station bond, which will be issued on May 18th.
So it's basically a bridge.
It is.
Just to carry us until the bond is.
The water department was, we were trying to decide whether it should be over a 10-year or a 20-year. If it was a 10-year, we would have went with alumni, which is happening this month or in March. 20-year, I'd have to wait for the fire station, and Scott wanted the 20-year. Just to let you know, the interest rates are creeping up. This is 1.59%. A year ago, this was at, I think, 1.25%, and when we first did it, it was 0.6 something, or so. Interest rates are moving up little by little. We just, for the board's notification, we are issuing the bond for alumni on March 29th, I believe. It'll be on your agenda on March 26th to approve it. We go out to bid, I believe, on the 14th. So there'll be a 10-year bond, and we'll be refinancing a couple of other bonds that we've issued in the past. Get some savings. It's not a lot of savings, but any savings is good.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
We need a vote.
We do need a motion to approve the sale of the bond.
We move the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the sale of the $847,000 bond anticipation note from the town for water main authorization by Article 4 of the May 5th, 2014 special town meeting dated March 2nd, 2018, and payable May 18th, 2018 to East Hampton Savings Bank at par with net interest cost of 1.59%.
Second.
Moved and second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
One abstention. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Hello. It's nice having you. We miss you. So we have Director of Finance and Budget, Bonnie Fleck here for an FY 2019 budget update.
I'm going to highlight the capital update tonight, as that is what I worked on prior to leaving last week on vacation. But at the board's directive at the last meeting, we wanted to look at ways of having the sewer project be brought inside the levy with from available funding rather than as a borrowing vote. So we went through the numbers and reworked everything. So I think we have this second page.
The whole thing.
Great, okay. So on the second page that you have, on the column on the right, details the funding of the capital plan from my previous memo. I'm sorry, the column on the left. On the column on the right is the reworked funding. A couple of pieces of new information in the funding sources. In the previous memo, we were just using funds from the undesignated fund balance, other available funds, which were some revolving accounts and other appropriations that were used, and the levy. So we had $2.474 million in funding sources. And in this updated version, we're using those same funding sources, but we're going to add an additional appropriation from free cash, which we are allowed to do in accordance with the financial policies once we meet some guidelines, along with an amount from overlay that was released by the Board of Assessors previously on August 31st. There's $70,000 remaining from that. And I have requested that the Board of Assessors consider another overlay release because now they know where the abatement applications are coming in, so they should have a good picture of where their needs stand. And I've asked for $278,207, and I'm fairly confident that they'll be able to provide that release. So that, combined with the additional $696,000 from excess free cash, would bring the total available funding to just over $3.5 million. From that, most of the capital plan stays the same with a few exceptions. The PMBC had requested $600,000 for the demolition of the old highway garage. We're going to table that at this point and remove that from the funding request. And that was based on the joint meeting discussion. The sewer design is in here, but not from a borrowing. It's from direct funding. Other facilities, is, we added to the 201,000, we added 100,000 to address the needs of the highway department roof that is in disrepair.
It's
And-
100,000.
I'm sorry, yes.
Highway roof is 100.
Yes. And the facility needs,
And to have the design money available for the facility needs study is the 200,000. Both of those came out of our joint meeting with FinCom last week.
And school committee.
And school, yeah,
Yeah.
right, school committee.
So those adjustments balance out the 3.5 million in funding that's available. So again, we would be able to do this, keep in adherence with our financial policies, and I'll detail that a little bit, and fund everything with, inside the levy, majority vote, within the capital plan article. What we would also need to do is in the section B, which we never really get to section B. We typically just stay in section A and do our capital appropriations and.
This is on the use of the undesignated fund
Yes.
balance.
So we usually
Section
just
A.
stay in section A. We get our, free cash certified. We appropriate money to maintain our 5% minimum balance. We appropriate money for capital, which is at 2.5% of the operating budget. And then we typically stop there. So if we're going to go further than that, we need to keep some higher reserves, which we've accorded for in this document. But it would allow us to take another $696,000 to fund towards OPEB. And again, the policy defines that we need to do that first. We could put just over $2 million in other reserves, which would include all other stabilization accounts. So capital stabilization, debt exclusion stabilization, or regular stabilization. And again, you can see where it shakes out the additional $696,000 at the bottom, which we're using in the capital plan as revised. So it's a good savings plan. That $2 million, I have some recommendations on, how that would be appropriated into capital stabilization primarily for use for future projects that the town may decide to pursue. There's also, I'm making a recommendation to fund the newly allowed injured on duty account. So we put it into stabilization because you have to do that in the policy, and then we take it out for this injured on duty account, which in my mind is more of a reserve anyway. And then, like I said, the bulk of it goes to capital stabilization. So, and again, that would keep us in compliance with our financial reserves that we have.
Any questions? Bruce?
Reflects what we discussed in the joint meeting and,
Last week?
it's good work.
I think at the joint meeting, we had also discussed looking for ways to start funding some amount of open space savings accounts in whatever form that might take. Any room to fit that in?
This would need to go into stabilization first,
Okay,
and then you could appropriate it out of stabilization for
okay.
one of those uses, absolutely.
There's so many mouths feeding from that trough, though. But, I mean, right now, what we do is we have been putting some funds aside annually into the community preservation, open space, all of the buckets, but including open space. Where
I'm doing
we earmark the open space cell tower funds already for that purpose. Over the years, we've collected, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Over the last 20 years, we've collected I think millions of dollars.
Probably millions at this point.
Yeah, which we spend right away, or we spend over time. But we're looking at putting whatever the available balance is from the cell tower funds for open space, again, into the blended community preservation fund. I don't know if it might be around 50, 60, 70,000.
Probably 70.
This year. The Community Preservation Committee will be here on the 12th to talk about their articles. I'm meeting with them on Wednesday night to see what their recommendations are for how much of the available funds might go towards each of those 4 buckets. So.
That being said, I think the town of the discussion, Jason references that, I think we're looking specifically, there's some sentiment for looking specifically to create funding accounts beyond the CPC account. And it's understood that, especially through your efforts, Keith, at maximizing our return on that, we don't want to be cheating ourselves out of any money, but at the same token, if there's some freedom to putting money that is outside of the CPC process and dedicated exclusively for open space, since we're hearing more and more of it, on its own merits, that I think we need to look at those two issues as a two-pronged attack to the process, using CPC to its fullest and then having another dedicated account, and making sure we do that the wisest way possible.
Yeah, we can, the main advantage of using the blended CPA, putting whatever funds are available into CPA funds, is that we do get state matching funds.
Right.
And even if it's a small amount, even if it's only, 20%, you don't get 20, we don't make 20% on any other investment except, CPA.
And also, as far as how we go about doing that, I know that objective wasn't sort of put on your radar until recently. So to the extent, in my mind, to the extent it's not necessarily reflected here, isn't troubling to me, but I do want to continue to think about that. And when overlay becomes available, when snow and ice becomes available, next year's budgeting, so on and so forth. Understanding that it's tough for you to make a couple $100,000 just appear out of nowhere on a week's notice.
Well, it probably is another issue that calls for another little working group to sit down and discuss how best to accomplish this without, cheating ourselves on CPA.
Yeah, there are lots of strategies. Some of them may involve people contributing money to non-town entities for whatever tax benefit advantages may still be in the law.
Right.
Right.
Does it currently
How did
exist?
that change?
If any.
Right, a land acquisition trust?
A land acquisition fund does currently exist. I think there's $1,100 in it.
$1,100, right.
I mean, that's what we had
But
prior
it
to
is-
CPA, so it just kind of
Right.
exists there.
Yeah, but I agree, trying to balance out what would be more beneficial in the long term.
And the benefit of the land acquisition fund compared to CPC is time and speed.
You can just, boom,
You can go.
provided you have the votes, you can
Once
just
you
do
put it
it.
in there, you can expend it, the committee can expend it. It doesn't require a town meeting vote to expend. CPC, you do have to come back. So those are pros and cons to that.
Well, and I would say the ability to spend it quickly, that cuts two
Right,
directions.
exactly.
Right.
It's a
You get
different,
20%, but you get the expediency.
Well, but also the expediency can cut the other direction too and can facilitate a less thoughtful decision. So,
it's an important distinction between the two.
sure.
Right, right.
So in the event that we did need to do something quickly, let's say the parcel came up and
You wanted to do an appraisal, you could,
we want to do something right away. We could use those funds,
Yes.
the $1,100, to do an appraisal on this parcel. But if we did in fact want to move up, we did the appraisal and we wanted to move up, as it is right now, is the
you need to go to town meting and ask for
shortest
funding.
window is probably a 3-month window.
An alternative might be, and I haven't talked to CPC about it in a while, but they set aside $5,000 in their budget for administrative purposes. They could probably go to a higher number, I'm not sure how much higher. But if, for example, we wanted to also include the funding for, a couple of appraisals during the course of the year, throw in another $5,000 to $7,000.
I would need to check, I think there's been a ruling on that, you cannot use CPC admin funds for appraisals.
Can you not?
So I looked that up.
But if we did have a dedicated
But
fund,
we could use the land acquisition
we could use
Yeah.
other funds for that
Right,
purpose.
but the money that the Conservation Commission oversees, that
Yes.
has been where we've gone over the years for appraisals when we do them.
Yes.
So we put the money there.
Flesh that out later on.
After they raise it.
So, in the beginning, early this evening, we're looking at, what kind of a number we're looking at right now, $600,000?
Yeah, it's just shy of 600,000. I am getting some updated figures. We've got some better calculations on fringe. Some things are a little higher, some are a little bit lower. And I'm tweaking the revenue projections now because we just got our first commitment in excise, the large one, and that's the one that I base any changes off of. And I am meeting with the Finance Committee Chair on Wednesday. We're just going to kind of go through some scenarios and see what looks good, and then I'll be able to present an in-depth reconciliation. So work continues. I think we're getting there. We're making progress. We're getting better data.
So is the March school committee meeting, is that the next time? When are we next getting together to FinCom schools?
Well,
That would make sense, because we're gonna be there anyway.
yeah, if we're going to be there, the
Is that enough time?
Yeah, it is, because the deadline for the warrant article for the budget is already in, and it just says to see what sums will appropriate, period. It doesn't have the recommendations. The recommendations we have a couple of weeks later. I think it would be nice to close, it would be nice to come to a close and seal the deal with the school committee at some point, I don't know if we'd be able to do it at their public hearing that they hold. Sometimes they get together with us either before or after that meeting, but I think it's worth looking at. I'm just trying to see if we had a scheduled, I have down that Tuesday, March 6th, according to our budget calendar, is the next scheduled joint meeting for the FinCom
That's FinCom.
at the schools and selectmen, so I would advise us to see how we're doing on that night.
Okay, so we're looking for schools to close that $600,000 gap as much as they're able to. And there's potentially the need for us to move something.
Right.
We think that we'll be able to move up with revenue estimates, but it sort of requires that the school committee meet us somewhere in the...
Yeah, there's a couple of moving parts, like I said, that some of the fringe costs, some are lower than I projected, some are higher. Like the retirement is higher, the health insurance is lower. So they're kind of netting out, but I'm looking at a couple of other issues with the excise. I need to get those numbers firm on the fringe now that we know. And the enrollment data, because that's all changing too with who's on what plan and where things are migrating to. And we've got a lot of new employees that we added, so I have to kind of factor that all in.
Okay.
But I'm shaking that out. I'm going to meet with the chair on Wednesday, and then I'll hammer out the updates for you.
That means during the day?
Yes.
Is there anything that is on the table, off the table? I mean, are we looking at, if we needed to close the gap, do we fund OPEB? Not as much?
Nope. Unless, you're
Do we
going
not put as
to...
much in debt exclusion stabilization? I mean, what, I guess.
That money is-
Those are the
you,
things,
but I'm also asking-
those are the things that we pay for in accordance with the policy, the financial
One of those
policies
are 18.
before we close on the operating budgets.
Right. So the OPEB contribution is defined in the financial policies. So it has to increase a certain amount every year. It has to incorporate stopping the bleeding for the new hires that come on. We fund, we deal with it.
Right.
So those things are in the financial policies. I think Steve can attest that our financial advisors and the actuaries actually went through them to make sure that our funding calculations were correct and that we were actually, yeah. So they review them every time they come out. And they make sure that what we say we are going to do is what we do.
That affects our discount rate that we got. So we got a favorable discount rate because we're doing the things that we said we were going to do.
I'd just rather have it out there, and if we have any discussion, if there's anything
Plus
that is on the
things,
table, not on the table.
things that, and we define this pretty well, the financial policies. One-time funds, stay one-time funds and don't bleed into the operating budget.
So the appropriations to any debt exclusion stabilization, those are coming from one-time funds. So that's, cutting that would not
Two
help
parts
the
of it.
operating budget.
Right, two
Exactly.
parts of it.
Right.
Correct. So,
Thank you. All right.
Thanks for bringing back a plan that met the goals of last week's joint
You
meeting.
can thank the assessors. So.
We ran out of money after that.
The only, I mean, we are taking some of that $600,000 that we omitted, or we removed from the budget, capital budget.
And shifting it.
We shifted it.
Yes.
But, so, I know that there was some concerns by Mr. McCray to make sure that we are in fact maintaining the buildings as they need to be maintained.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the PMBC has those funds available to be able to, whether it's the univents at Shaker Lane, or it's the roof at the library, or whatever it happens to be. He wanted to make sure that there was still some funding available there, so that they're still doing the projects that we're slated to do.
Yes. So we are leaving the $293,000 that they had requested for other projects, and we're additionally adding funding for the highway roof and for the facility needs. So we're adding another $300,000. So.
Thank you.
One thing too that I think bears mentioning, so folks understand, the $1.5 million associated with the sewer is, the plan is ultimately that the ratepayers, that will be incorporated into the structure of the ratepayers' responsibility and incorporated into the
reimbursed
bonding for
accordingly,
the sewer.
yeah.
So it ultimately should come back to the town at some point.
Ultimately, it will come back to the town if we do sewer.
If we do sewer.
Right. We have, as soon as we have sewer users, we will have.
In addition to the money we've expended to date.
Right, that's right. Those are all eligible costs to be paid by sewer users.
Right, and they're all being structured as such to ensure that we can roll them together when we do the full
Repay
sewer.
them.
And it's not on the agenda tonight, and we've given you an update, we've given the board members an update on it, but we think we're making really good progress with the sewer, with the smart sewer project, and we'll.
Financial plan.
The financial plan is what we've been focusing on, and I think we're optimistic that the pieces are fitting into place, and we'll have an update.
Do you think we should do one on the
For the
12th?
future.
Is that, how's that agenda looking?
The focus of the 12th, that's our last meeting before the warrant closes,
Yeah.
and if we have time, we could have a short update on the sewer, but I know we wanted to have a separate meeting for a general discussion at the end. But we can have a short update.
I just hate to leave people in mystery here. I mean,
Yeah.
we had a working session where we did, the engineers shared numbers with us, which they've been modeling. We got our first look at the hard details.
What, five scenarios, I think?
Yeah. And I'd just like to, have an opportunity to share that, even if it's a brief forum.
Sure, yeah, we can
And
certainly
then-
do that, and what we're in the process of putting together right now is the survey
Right.
that we're hoping to get out
This week?
This week.
Yes.
It contains samples, I don't want to misquote the numbers, but we had asked the consultant to put together sample cost figures for a typical residential property, a typical commercial property, and the survey will be sharing those numbers, we'll have them on the website, and we can certainly go into those in further detail at our next meeting.
Perhaps a 5 minutes,
Right.
10-minute kind of update,
Yeah.
mostly focused on the board, let the public know when the public meetings
And
will
that's,
be.
they've
then we
scheduled
can-
some standalone meetings for that.
I think I'm reading Bonnie sign language here. Perhaps we could put it on the agenda for the 6th, the joint meeting with
Oh,
FinCom.
The
Yeah.
FinCom would love to.
Oh, good.
Oh.
So,
6th
That's
of
great.
what?
March.
March.
That's
Yeah.
next week.
Oh, yes, we have a joint meeting with them. With
Next
FinCom
Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Well, I'll be involved in it. Have fun. You can come join me, but I won't come join you. How's that?
Do you get Wi-Fi there?
I won't even attempt.
I'm game for that, and
That's a good idea, because the information's ready, Fred from FinCom.
That's right, he's in.
Part of our group. and,
Right.
It was, we'll be happy to share that information. Great idea to have the venue for that be an update for the FinCom joint meeting next week.
But just the folks listening, certainly that is a public meeting, you're welcome to attend, but that is not going to be the primary forum in which we present this to the public. So please feel free to pay attention, come, ask questions, but to the extent that it's not advertised as a big public forum that's going to focus solely on the sewer.
Oh, yeah, I don't do that too.
Yeah, there'll be plenty of that as well.
schedule that for another night.
All right, great. I think any other budget questions? Lonnie? Lonnie, thank you very much. Appreciate you getting that to us. Appreciate it. Steve, thank you. All right, next up on our agenda is public input member updates. So if we could, let's see. If there's anybody in the public that wishes to be heard, please identify yourself, your street address, and address the chair.
Katie Caruth, Goldsmith Street. And I just wanted to follow up on the discussion, the talk that was happening at the last meeting, where there was like pros and cons of development, and let's not miss, getting a target here. And I know that a target is not on our radar, but I wanted to comment in response to that issue. And I want to first say I'm not anti-development. I support housing for our seniors, and I support more low-income housing, and I welcome new people to Littleton. But the pace of residential development growth and sprawl is clearly an issue in our town. And it's no secret that taxpayers have been concerned about this for a long time. Every time a big parcel of conservation or agricultural land comes up, we have the same discussion, and I'm thrilled to hear what you talked about tonight about dedicating a fund, and I thank Cindy for looking into that and initiating that, because that's really encouraging to see. But we've had kind of a sad history with the discussions and discussion around Cooper, and the public was described as basically begging at the public hearings. And as somebody who cares very much about, I'll keep it short. As somebody who cares very much about environmental issues, it's hard to watch our valuable resources being lost. And I want to point out that the master plan tells us that by 2005, more than half of the town's agricultural land was lost to development. By 2016, more than 2/3 was gone. And my understanding is in the next 5 years, there's going to be a very big turnover in Massachusetts of agricultural land as our farmers age. The master plan states that throughout the process, residents expressed concern over development and the loss of farmland and open space, which is eroding the identity of the town. Cindy recently did an informal survey online, and 80% of people were concerned with the development that's happening. So, again, I'm thrilled to see this talk of dedicating money, but otherwise, it's not evident that Littleton's responding to the concerns of the citizens. And I found one online article that said that our housing stock has increased 10% by 2010. And then I was listening to the radio, and I heard about Charlie Baker's program to promote housing development. And the Assistant Secretary of Housing and Community Development, Crystal Carnegie, was asked on the radio who's participating in this pro-growth program. And the only town she could come up with was Littleton. So the path we are on of rapid development conflicts with the concerns and stated values of the taxpayers. And I just want to point out, open space saves the community money by avoiding the cost of infrastructure and municipal services like schools, police, fire, roads, and more. For every tax dollar received for open space, a municipality expends 43 cents in services. For every $1 received in residential taxes, the town expends an average of $1.10. So residential development is a net financial and environmental loss to a community. Even commercial development comes at a cost. We've had to hire multiple full-time police officers to work at the point. And now we need a special ladder truck to reach the 4-story building at the point. So what we have, and it'll reach other things too, but what we have is sprawl, and that's defined by the Brookings Institute as low-density peripheral growth, new subdivisions on vacant or agricultural land. It relies almost exclusively on automobile transportation. And there's other qualifications. Land use is controlled by small local governments. And the impact of sprawl is rising traffic congestion, decreased open space and environmentally sensitive land, increased air pollution, cost to taxpayers, providing municipal services and infrastructures to accommodate growth, and a loss of a sense of community. We also know that undeveloped spaces are important for climate change mitigation because they store carbon. They're also important for water and air quality, and open space boosts our property values. Permanently protected open space increases them even more. And I know it's a challenge, it's a difficult problem statewide, and it's a hard problem, and I know you're all working very hard, but neighboring towns have taken action to address the problem, and we can do the same. The master plan recommends a stronger open space cluster zoning bylaw. Concord has one for parcels over 10 acres. 50% is permanently protected by an ag preservation restriction. I'm gonna finish.
Really? How many more pages you got?
A couple more paragraphs.
Well, okay. So essentially what you're looking at is you want us to be aware of sprawl.
Let me tell you, I'd love to tell you about these particular...
I'd love to meet with you and talk about it, Katie, but we have business we have to take care of, and this is definitely an opportunity for public input, but you can't come here and give us an op-ed. I mean, so far it's been 7 minutes.
Has it been 7 minutes?
Yeah.
Let me tell you about what our neighbors are doing. Concord has the strong cluster zoning bylaw. Westford has something similar. The town of Harwich has a residential subdivision growth rate limit. They issue no more than 50 permits per year. Westford has a growth management zoning bylaw that limits housing growth annually. And they all state the same reasons for doing these things. It's to protect the water, to ensure that growth occurs in a planned and orderly fashion, and to preserve and enhance community character.
Good.
I've got more.
There'll be more meetings.
But, so I just want
honestly,
to...
I would welcome an opportunity to sit down and talk to you about
Yeah.
this, because I think that it is something that's definitely on all of our radars.
Yeah.
We are all looking at it. We've looked at Harwich, we've looked at all the communities around us.
Mm-hmm.
We are completely dedicated to it. The chairman of the planning board, we're in lockstep with them. We're trying to make sure that we are partnering with them, with the master plan implementation committee, with the master plan. That's our guiding document. If you do a little bit more research and you look at any of the communities that tried to put any kind of moratorium or anything like that in place, the amount of open space and farmers that sold in development that happened spiked by unprecedented amounts prior to the town meeting at which they were scheduled to vote on those moratoriums.
2A and Acton, that's how that got developed.
That's exactly
It was
how
all
that
farmland, and then they went in to put in restrictive zoning, and everybody filed their papers to development, and boom, that's what we ended up with.
So I just want to caution that the sky is falling. We are working hard to do what we can to keep the character of Littleton. We either grew up here or we chose to live here, and for those that grew up here, they chose to stay here. So we are very committed to maintaining the bucolic feel of Littleton and to retain the farmers. And I think that this board, the planning board, the conservation commission, all the regulatory boards and all the folks in town hall, we're all working hard to make sure that we retain the character that is Littleton. And I mean, to quote Crystal from
Carnegie.
I've met her. I spoke with her at an MMA meeting, and she actually just got promoted. And to say that Littleton is the only community that she could say where there was growth, that was the reason
No,
she mentioned.
belonged to this program, that participated.
No,
housing
that
initiative?
wasn't what she said. I listened to that. She couldn't remember any town. It was her aide who fed her the name Littleton, but she does know who we are because she's.
Because we're at the forefront.
We're in the forefront. Crystal was the moderator at a presentation I made in September. It was at a best practices conference on what our community is doing to address housing needs. I could bring in the package of proposals we'd either adopted, or the package of proposals that came directly from the master plan that was unanimously adopted at our town meeting, where 3 of the proposals were coming forward in October, all of which passed. But so they're aware of what we're doing, and the Housing Choice Program, frankly, rewards communities who've already met the housing goals. It's a reward for that which you've done. So hopefully we'll be able to, if the governor's office is finally offering financial incentives for addressing housing needs, I hope that we can grab some of that money, because we're going to need it for helping with infrastructure and other things.
I have a request. Well, I mostly wanted the public to know that there are many ways to regulate. You know, I don't know historically how it's worked. I know it's working really well in Concord. And they have like 6 APRs from this mechanism. And I know it's not easy. Okay. So I just want people to know that
I
it's
appreciate
possible.
that, and I love the fact that you've done this homework, you've done a lot of research. We have as well. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but we've got folks that live in this community, that volunteer in this community, that work for communities that are surrounding us in some positions that are able to give us pretty good information on what's working, what's not working. So whether it be town administrators in other communities, people that work in building departments in other communities, planning boards in other communities. So we communicate with the boards of selectmen in the surrounding communities. So we're. I
don't want to belabor this point either, but I would like to address one mischaracterization. I think a lot of the towns around the area, they would be well served to have a group from Littleton come over to them and teach them a little bit about proactively preserving a green belt through the center of the town, as we did. And some of the components of that are being respectful in working with landowners rather than working against them, and in offering them a future of, we're out there to regulate you, we're out there to change the rules on you, so you better, as someone said, hurry up and develop, because that's the impact you have. We have had a success rate starting from by the Acton line with the Wickham Frost properties, and then across Long Lake over to Prouty, Morgan property, Hartwell, and we are definitely acknowledging that there's a next phase to that, and we had discussion early tonight, we've had it at other meetings. But to kind of make sweeping characterizations that, we're just doing awful and we're not doing anything, we should just learn from other communities, that's just not a statement of reality. If there's one area where we're deficient, where we encourage sprawl, it's because, and where we actually are at the probably the lower end of the scale in environmental protection, it's at the nitrite loading in the common area, in our need to do, as all of our neighboring communities do, put in proper sewering so we can have development where we want it, where there already is development, and of the sort that we would like, so we can have services we like. We protect the groundwater at the same time, and it gives us a better position to say, no, you're not going to build in these surrounding properties, because we're going to encourage you and make it attractive for you to build downtown. And that's, I think, probably one area where I'll accept that we're a little behind our neighbors, all of whom have sewering. So
I disagree with you, and I'd love to.
I agree with the mission, but I don't agree with your stated characterization or necessarily the steps forward. But like Chuck, I would love to sit down with you.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I did not think they would like to hear what I was going to say tonight.
Well, it was a lot of random, it was drive-by shooting. Boom, here's a shot here, then we'll go on to the next topic, take another shot.
Yeah, I know. It's just that following the Cricket Lane loss of 11 more acres of pristine farmland, it's hard. I mean, I've worked in environmental issues. I've, worked as an extension agent with people in different countries. And so I am passionate about this. And that's why it stays with me. And maybe it feels like a drive-by shooting. But I'm going to ask that you please put on the webpage the number of occupancy permits that are being issued year by year and the number of building permits. Because I couldn't find it.
Probably in the town report.
So the building commission is the
Before
problem.
we go any further, Mr. Gervis was patiently waiting. He had some comments, I believe he did.
I did, and Paul generally hit on them. First of all, thank you very much for keeping this sort of at our forefront, and because I think it is integral. One of the ways that I think we're looking at, and you and I have had these discussions, so I'm not really saying it for your benefit, Kate, and frankly, I know you disagree with my perspective on this. Not to belabor the point, but the reason I'm so personally invested in pursuing the sewer is because of what it can do to help us mitigate that sprawl aspect by driving density in certain locations. That should give us, if we do it correctly, and all of these are qualified with if you do it correctly, that should give us the opportunity to drive that high-density, high-value development in one particular location, like Paul said, while incentivizing or disincentivizing development elsewhere. But that's not being done in a vacuum. If we were to simply put the sewer in, I think that would probably potentially have unintended consequences. The reason the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and I'm pointing at Mike Zeldin back here from the Implementation Committee, is looking at the zoning implications is because we have to get it right, and we have to get it right all at the same time, because if we don't get it right, then I think we could have these negative effects, and that's where in particular looking at the lessons we can learn from other communities could be really important. So I know you don't love the sewer, but to the extent that we share the same goal of minimizing sort of that sprawl, that's really where I see the benefit of the sewer fitting in and how it comes together, as long as we can marry the sewer with the zoning that allows us to actually achieve those objectives. Because I think otherwise your concern of it just feeds additional sprawl could become a reality. And I understand that. I think that's a legitimate concern.
Yeah, and I would mention in terms of the entrance to 2A that we do drive by the Cooper project, which sort of represents a failure of the towns being able to execute.
Another mischaracterization, Katie. You don't have, you're not stating the facts correctly. The town had no opportunity to purchase that. We negotiated in good faith. We tried to do everything we could. We retained as much as we could. In the 23 acres, I think was the
24 acres out of the
24 acres out of the out of 41.
Yeah, I knew.
So 63% of that land
Right.
was retained. We didn't have an opportunity to purchase that land.
Right.
I know.
We did not.
I know, but if we had, so I just recommend looking towards Concord, to their way they've done their cluster zoning, and I would recommend looking towards Drakeit.
We have spoken with Concord.
Have you spoken with Drakeit?
No, I haven't.
They're very
I'm typically
proactive.
looked at Drake
Right.
for-
I've taken up.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, Katie, you and I have talked about this issue, and growing up here, I do share concerns about growth in town, but I do know that we are being proactive in trying to preserve what we can. It's hard for privately owned property. We don't have any control over that, what residents choose to put their property up for sale. It's out of our hands. But as far as trying to preserve open space, we talked earlier about the CPC funds, we talked about the land trust. We are trying to be more proactive because I do think it's really important. And I know that you came here out of concern, and I appreciate that. And you know, you never present a problem without presenting a solution, and so you offered some possible solutions. And you know, you don't know that we've already looked at some of these solutions. You would have no way of knowing that. So I don't, you know, I think it's an important dialogue that we need to continue to have between the boards in town and the residents in town, because it is a concern. It's a concern for us, and it's a concern for the residents. So I appreciate you coming forward and bringing this to our attention. And Like, the chairman said, and Mr. Glady, we'd love to have continual dialogue about this and get the planning board involved, and seeing what we can do, and what we can do better, and just keep being proactive, so.
Right, and I just ask that if you believe in it, that you fight for it, and that you vote for it, because you're the only 5 people in town that get to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So one of the things that we did speak about earlier tonight, this is the last thing that's going to be said on this stuff, is the land fund. Where we want to try to find ways so that if we have an opportunity to buy a Cricket Lane type of property, we have that available to us, and it's not going to put us behind the 8 ball financially. Thank you very much. Anybody else that would like to be heard? Mr. Zeldin.
Michael Zeldin, 11 Low Street. This is a technical question. This will hopefully lower the drama somewhat. I'm just curious, is it the general practice of the board to vet proposed warrant items for, I'll call it, anticipated legal issues? There's one that happens to be coming up in which I believe that other towns in adopting it or considering it have run into legal issues where it's been challenged as being onerous. I'm sort of trying to be brief. So I just want to know stuff that, or a warrant article that will change a practice or lengthen a time. I'm not trying to pick on the Historic Commission here. It's just that they're proposing an extension, I believe, on the warrant. I'm not trying to argue the merits of it. But here's an example of one in which there is a past history, I believe, in Massachusetts and other states, where it's been challenged because of its timing and a few other items. I'm just wondering if council ever gets a chance to weigh in. That's it. It's a technical question.
I'm not suited to answer the question.
Well, on the, we do not have a legal opinion from town council on the historical commission's proposal, which they're about to present to us for discussion, but it seeks to extend from 6 months to 18 months the period of delay under the demolition delay bylaw. And I'm not.
Can I just say that there's
familiar
several
with the case law.
towns in Massachusetts that have 8.
We'll get to the discussion on the next item. We're very close.
And, I mean, if I may, I think some articles, certainly we have engaged town council before it's been put on the warrant. I mean, perfect example is when the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board met jointly to discuss the zoning associated with adult use cannabis. So I don't think it happens for everyone, but it certainly happens some, I think, more than others.
Well, at the end of the day, the council does review the whole warrant, so if they're aware of legal issues, they do bring them to our attention.
Right, certainly before we get to.
Yeah, it may be an interesting procedural question, because for when there's a zoning bylaw proposal made, that the law provides that the planning board holds a public hearing on it. When it's a general bylaw, we don't really have a procedure where we have a public hearing before walking into town meeting. Right. And rather than have the entire discussion on the floor of town meeting, maybe it would be well to have a discussion, post a public hearing. One of the motions, not on this one, but on the voter petition article, one of the motions that we're looking at tonight is to receive a proposal and schedule a public hearing on a voter petition to amend the town bylaws, really so that the community, so that we can get input by affected folks. Maybe we look at that for, again, so that the entire debate isn't on town meeting floor. Maybe we want to vet it ourselves, but.
Planning for the future. Thanks a lot.
Because we like to limit how long we're at town meeting, Michael.
We do. Thank you. Anybody else like to be heard? Public input? Good. All right, member updates. Start over here, Mr. Vice Chair.
Sure, I'll steal this one from Chase and I were fortunate enough to attend on Saturday.
I think he got there before we did.
Oh, were you there earlier at the robotics?
He was on time.
Oh, wow. Well, you were gone before I got there. All right, then you met my robotics. Joe and Chase and I were all at the Littleton Robotics open house at the Patriot Beverage facility on Harvard Road. And I'll tell you, this is just we've tracked over the past couple of years the admirable success of that program. But after viewing it over the expanse of a couple of years, it's amazing how they've grown. They're now mentoring other towns, and they're ambitiously seeking out national competitions. And I forget the name of the website number, but your dollars would be well spent to donate to their program. They do a wonderful job of growing education in the STEM fields in a way that it both has hands-on and enjoyable applicability for the kids involved, and in real life applications too. The things they're working on can be easily adapted to working environments, and it's a great program. And kudos to Patriot Beverage again for accommodating them on the building they're in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul. Cindy?
Okay, so two things. The Littleton Coalition Against Addiction met last week, and there was a great turnout. There was many residents and healthcare providers from Littleton, Westford, and Groton. Chief Wodzinski also attended, as well as Deputy Chief Patterson. The coalition's moving forward very successfully to create a drop-in center as well as a support group. And they're going to be reaching out to collaborate with other local communities so that they can network and bridge the gap and find out what other communities are doing to help combat this crisis. It was Chief Wodzinski offered the new space at the fire department for the drop-in center, which will be great. They also are going to partner with See a New Sun Foundation. SANS is an organization that's been in town for many years now. It started in 2000 by Barbara Wickham to help raise awareness about suicide and offer resources and support to those families. So it's a great partnership between the two organizations, so we're looking forward to seeing that move forward. And I also just wanted to mention I got a email today from Nicole Lawrenson, who from the Elder and Human Services. She is hosting a event on March 14th at 4 o'clock at Elder and Human Services. It's actually the New England Justice Center out of Lawrence is going to be here. And they are going to host an event for people who are caring for a family member's child due to substance abuse, mental health, or domestic issues. They're going to be available to answer questions about housing, education, and health care needs of the child, as well as other resources to support both the family and the child. If you'd like to sign up, you can call Nicole at 978-540-2475, but she's hoping that there'll be a good turnout for that event. It's great that she put that together, so we're hoping that people will attend.
Thanks, Cindy.
Yep.
Chase?
So I'm going to, well, in addition to the Littleton robotics work, which was a great deal of fun, I went with my 5-year-old or 4-year-old son. He came back and he immediately started putting Legos together, wondering where his computer was to program them. I was like, you don't have one of those. Not yet anyway, but he really looked up to those guys. But following Cindy's lead, I wanted to note something that's coming up rather than something did in the last couple of weeks, and that's the mini golf at the library. So the library is hosting a fundraiser March 23rd and 24th. 23rd is an evening event geared towards adults and, Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, adults and older teens. Is that right? Do you know?
I think so.
Katie?
Sure.
That's what I read.
Anybody who pays the admission.
Right? Yeah, right. Anybody who pays the admission. And then Saturday on the 24th is families. So hors d'oeuvres, mini golf, good chance to raise some money for the library and hopefully not embarrass yourself too badly playing mini golf.
Will there be a window?
Different companies are designing different holes, so different companies are sponsoring different holes and designing.
That's awesome.
Should be done.
Mr. Knox?
I was just happy to be able to attend that 6328. I don't know what it stands for, but
They were given a random number when they signed up. For the first time they signed up, they were given a number, and that's the
Is that
registration
really what
number, yeah.
But I was fascinated by the whole thing. I knew nothing about it, but I went in there, and like Mr. Glavy said, I want to thank Patriot Beverage because they have a perfect workshop area that they can work in the machine. We got to see the championship machine. I was able to watch part of a film that showed their robot in action last year, and I was fascinated. It was almost like the thing you used to see on TV.
The Jetsons?
No.
Different robot?
No, different one. But it was excellent. They had an excellent turnout, and the number of kids with the shirts on. I was amazed how many people are involved in that so quickly.
It is an awesome program, and it's meeting the needs of there's kids there that aren't necessarily going to benefit from Alumni Field. They're just not kids that do sports. Some of them do, and some of them, you know, they do both robotics as well as sports, and the adult children that are there. Miss Cheryl Temples, the middle school principal, her son Zach is one of the mentors, and he's a college student, and he's amazing with the kids. And Dee Dee is, I can't think of her last name, but two young adults that are helping these kids, and they're really mentoring them, and they're showing them a great path. And so it's an extension of our STEM program in the schools. And I will say that early on, Katie was reaching out, trying to find a space. She reached out to Joe because of his experience in real estate and said, we need some space. We did it in the high school last year, and every night when they'd break down at midnight or whatever, they'd have to pack up and put everything in the closets. So it was like an hour breakdown, an hour of setup every night. And so they were looking to find some space. They set up a 501c3. Katie Bonner is the president. It is littletonrobotics.org. It's amazing to see what they've been able to put in place. So Katie reached out to us, I guess in the fall, August or the fall, and we started trying to find some space, and we reached out to Dan Gray from Patriot Beverage, and he had the old Sanderson house, which, not Sanderson house, what's the name of the old white house up Sanderson Road on the right-hand side? The white... Thatcher House. And there's a barn that the fire department used to use for training, and they were going to use that whole first floor of that entire house, including that barn, was going to be their machine shop. It turned out that the machine, the equipment that they were going to put in there wouldn't necessarily hold the weight. It might have, but they didn't want to find out the hard way. And Patriot Beverage said, come on down and use the research and development lab that used to be used for Very Fine, and it's an unbelievable space. They have a garage door where they could get all the equipment in, and they've got more space than they could ever need. They've got offices so the kids can do their homework when they're not working on their portion of it. It's an unbelievable production going on down there, and really, it's, you know, we talk about TIFs and trying to solicit businesses to come to town to be good corporate citizens, and these guys just stepped up and really showed us how, beyond giving us expired Pepsi products. Discontinued, not expired, sorry. So, hats off to Patriot Beverage. It's a great story.
Come up to the
hats
third
off.
floor and toast Patriot with us.
Right, yeah.
There's something
Mr. Bergman's buying. All right, so next up on the agenda, we have the annual and special town meeting insertion of articles. So Mr. Bergman, if you want to take the lead here.
Yeah, we've got tonight and 2 weeks from tonight as the regular meetings remaining before the warrant closes for town meeting. And so for starters, what I wanted to prepare, or just share with you as sort of a scorecard of the articles that we've identified for the warrant. And we have some folks to talk to us tonight about particular articles, but then and you've already voted to insert some articles, those shown in blue, like in this case, the special town meeting articles 1 and 2, you inserted last time. Tonight, we're going to ask you to vote to insert Article 4 to establish the special leave injury fund that Bonnie talked about earlier. And for our meeting for our next meeting on the 12th, we're looking at having the Community Preservation Committee in to talk to us about their article. So this is, using that format, this is a suggestion of looking at how to look at tonight and the 12th. that if you would like, since Bonnie just went through the capital funding plan, if you wanted to vote to insert those recommendations in the form of an article, we prepared the motion, or prepared the form of that article in number 7. For the meeting on the 12th of March, we're looking at having meet with the Water Department and Park and Rec to go over their enterprise funds. Community Preservation will be here to discuss their budget article as well. We can talk with the Personnel Board about personnel amendments. Trust Fund Commissioner's recommendations will be ready by then. You've already inserted Articles 1 through 4, Article 9, and Articles 11 through 13 on that list. And then the remainder is two articles that for next time that the Water Commissioners are proposing. If they decide to go forward with both of them, they can come here and talk to us about it. We had on the zoning article for marijuana, the Selectmen and Planning Board had a very productive joint meeting, pun intended, last Thursday, and Town Council is drafting the form of the bylaw. I see the chair of the Planning Board is here tonight. I know we met with Maren, and we're going to go over just the notes of how we think we exited the room on last Thursday. We'll have in the form of a proposed bylaw along with a map. And then, but it would be helpful to have both of the boards actually meet together jointly. I think there was a motion that essentially let us go forward. Before we put the article in the warrant, though, let's meet, let's just look at it again, and it would be helpful if planning board members could come to our meeting on the 12th. I don't think you have another meeting scheduled for after the 1st. You meet this Thursday night. I know, and they're talking about senior residential developments and some other things. So, so we'll be ready to proceed there. And then there are 2 articles that are up for discussion tonight for you. There are 3 articles up for discussion, 2 of which are offered by town entities. So you would need to approve this, the tax title properties article. We've drafted one and can talk about that tonight. We have the Historical Commission to talk about their requested bylaw amendment. And also we have the petitioner who's prepared a voter petition for town bylaw amendment regarding reducing plastic bag use. And in the case of the plastic bags, we've come up with the idea that we should, well, 2 things. The board wants copies of that to go out to each of the retailers, which we will do. The document itself was amended last week in consultation between town council and the petitioner, so it's in finalized form, so it would be ready to go out. But we would like to, so that for the purpose of vetting it and having the first discussion not be on the floor of town meeting, we'd like to have the board vote tonight to schedule a public hearing on that particular proposal, so that we can send it out to affected parties, tell them there's going to be a public hearing, when it's going to be, and have a chance to get some feedback. But Tracy can go and tell us about the proposal, talk to us about it tonight. So tonight we've got the Historical Commission. We have Tracy Cutter with her petitioned article on plastic bags, and we also can talk about the it's a type of Newtown Road tax title property.
If I may just, Tracy?
Yes.
You've got your counsel with you, and I know Mr. Jeffries has his counsel with him, the young attorneys in the room. But just because it's a school night, and if we could just kind of flip things around with the historical, you guys be okay if we brought the young petitioners forward first and heard them first? That's okay. You do have a choice.
Okay. I mean, I don't know about you, but we're all here, 4 of us, 4 times our time.
Yeah, we're fine.
If that's how you guys want to go, that's fine.
I mean, the agenda item was posted at 7:30, it's now 8:15, so.
Absolutely, and that's kind of how our
We're a
agenda
different
goes. That's
historical
kinda how our agenda
commission than we
goes.
used to be, so.
All right, so we do have the placement of all articles, and we can certainly take you all here, since there are 4 of you here. We can take you all first, if that is your pleasure. It's the pleasure of the board. I'm personally, I'd rather have Mr. Jeffries, who's got a young boy on 8:15, 8:20, and Tracy, Ms. Cutter with her young daughter, but.
You are the chairman, you.
I am.
Let's just go ahead and take it in order and you know, come on with it.
Okay. You're up.
Thank you. So we can be fairly brief, but the Littleton Historic Commission, I'm the chairman, 4 of my members are.
Identify yourself by name and address, please.
What's that?
Name and address, please.
Andrew Watt, 17 Nagog Hill Road.
Rachel Robinson, 181 Mill Road.
Linda Stein, 81 New Estate Road.
Donna White, 5 Hartwell Ave.
Thank you.
So we are here to propose an amendment, Article 22 of the town meeting to update Chapter 65 of the bylaws. Specifically, the bylaw was passed about 17, 18 years ago, and the Littleton Historic Commission's main role, among other responsibilities, is to try and protect historical resources by enforcing the demolition delay bylaw. We have 2 major additions to the proposal. The first is a modification of the regulation to include properties that are more than 50 years old as subject to Chapter 65. And the second major concept is to extend the ability to delay the permit issuance on a preferentially preserved historic structure from 6 months to 18 months. As was already mentioned earlier about legal concerns, there are no legal concerns with this basic concept. This is not new for the state of Massachusetts. There's about 60% of towns in the state that have demolition bylaws, and they range anywhere from 6 to 18 months. We would not be the first. The other changes to the rule are basically procedural. They are to include that during the delay period, the building is maintained weatherproofed and it's secured in some fashion. In addition, we propose the ability to impose fines, which are added to the document. They're given by the building commissioner should a owner fail to weatherproof or secure the building during the delay. I think another thing that's really important to mention is that the 18-month delay is at the end of the building being termed preferentially preserved, and it can be removed by the commission at any time during that period of time, or the owner can withdraw the request for delay or for demolition, in which case the delay would not take effect. So,
And I just want to add a couple of things. The Massachusetts Historical Commission recommends that towns have something beyond a 6-month delay, which is what we currently have. So they encourage that. In most towns that have had a 6-month demolition delay find that it's ineffective. The developers just wait 6 months. It really isn't an impediment to them, and then they just demolish the building. Having a longer period of time would allow us and the owner and other interested parties in town to try to find an alternative, to try to find another buyer or move the building or do something. 6 months is not enough time to do that.
And it's why Littleton has lost so many valuable historical keys to our past. You have to do something. Our hands are tied with this 6-month demolition delay. You have to give us a tool to use. You have to do something. You have to help us. We have a list of all the towns around us that they say you have a 6-month demolition delay. Are you kidding? It's comical. It's comical too.
Let me ask this question, if I may. If somebody wants to put an addition on a historical piece of property, what regulations are in place currently?
So an addition is not a demolition.
Not a demolition, so if somebody, if I bought a house on Foster Street.
Yes.
And I wanted to do some sort of addition, what historical restrictions do we have? Do we have any?
We have none. Unfortunately, Littleton is probably one of the only towns that does not have a registered historic district.
Has that been tried?
Yes. It was a long
It
time
was
ago.
voted down at town meeting, it was voted by 50% of the people, but it didn't meet the 2/3. But we are thinking about doing it again, we are looking at that as an option.
I believe that was like 1990 or 1987. It hasn't been recently.
There's another tool, though, to your point, using a tool, but there's something else that I think is important to us, and I asked the question, don't the answer, but I think that it's important that we work with you to try to help to get you that tool so that we can retain the historical properties that we have in town.
So under Massachusetts general law, if you were interested in doing that, you would have to form a study commission. It actually could be made up of members of the historical commission, but it's not something we could actually, you can't charge us with that goal.
Yeah.
And can I just ask one question before, on current bylaw, before making some points about your proposed change? What is the number of years that is covered right now for the demolition bylaw?
You mean when does a property apply?
No, well, what does it cover? Because you say right now you'd make it any building over 50 years.
Yeah.
So what is the present?
Right now, if it's registered on the Registry of National Historic Places, or it's in the town inventory.
Okay, because I'm thinking my house, which is far from being historically relevant, is over 50 years old. Anything built after 1968, I mean, before 68, basically everything in Baldwin Hill Road, along Goldsmith Street, and all those.
Yeah, we wouldn't
subjects.
necessarily act on anything that's 50 years old, we would just have the option of looking at it.
I don't think you should have the authority to act on that.
Well, the Massachusetts Historical Commission does they define historic as 50 years old. That's where that came from, is from the Mass Historical
I don't doubt
Commission.
that certain structures can be, but that's a pretty broad authority to be granted.
So-
The other point too is, I can see where 6 months may not give you enough time to identify, an alternative buyer or means of preserving it, but I don't know how, I'd like to hear how you would use 18 months, because that's pretty onerous to put on somebody. So if somebody just owns a house in a subdivision, they wanted to get, they're selling it, new buyer, we've seen this happen right on New Estate Road up the street from us, knocked down an older home and built a new one. Well, wow, I was shocked they did it. But if this bylaw were in place, technically, you could have said, no, you can't do it. You gotta keep that old house instead of the new one. Well, I'm not sure how historic preservation would be served by that.
Well, that's the whole point. You're missing the whole point, which is that the older home has a character that cannot be replaced by tearing it down and building a new.
Well, not all of them do.
Yeah.
No. I love my home. There's no historic value to it.
But you're missing the first part of chapter 65, which is that it's only if it's deemed to be.
Deemed by whom?
Deemed by us.
Okay, well, there you go.
And to your first point, so this proposal, by including a time trigger, saves the town money. Because currently,
not litigation,
we would have to go and inventory properties, which cost the town several $100s per property to add to the official town inventory. So we can still inventory any structure that's more than 50 years old. It's just
I
money to use.
applaud and have supported funding for that in the past, because that is actually adding to our historical record. The buildings that we're documenting, we know where they came from, who owned them, how they were used over time, and it builds their, their case for historic relevance. But just to pick a point in time, and then when you start to visualize what properties that could mean, it's mind-boggling.
The towns around us that have demolition delays, Acton.
Well, we have one too, don't we?
Yes, we have. 12 months.
Okay, well, so we're talking about when, to make it 50 years in 18 months. That's the relevant changes here, correct? Okay.
Acton, 18 months. Amesbury, 18 months. Bedford, 18 months. Brookline, 18 months. Chatham, 18 months. Medford, 18 months.
And how many years do they qualify under their bylaws for each of those cases?
So the specifics of their laws, I'm not familiar with, but the concept of having 50 years is a basic principle. It's very common. These laws typically are structured in one of three ways, either an age, or an inventory, or if they're in a particular location. Since we don't have a, as previously mentioned, district, then that option is really not available to us, so that leaves the other two options.
The 50 years, that's been set by the state. The reason that I understand most people have a problem with 50 years is because it's still within their lifetime, and you don't think of that as being historical. However, it will become historical in the future. A lot of places, they don't want to have buildings that they will have to preserve for long periods of time. So, for instance, in Cambridge, a lot of institutions do actually try to knock down buildings before they hit 50 years. Now that's going to create a lot of problems in the future where you have no inventory for houses of a certain period of time. So it's not necessarily about current history, but it's about posterity for the future and preserving time frames from throughout history. That's the reason behind it.
I have a question. So the commission, you would determine if the home is historically significant. And so what happens, what say does the homeowner have in it?
So during the process, there's an open meeting. The homeowner is invited to come and participate. And
open meeting or a hearing?
I'm sorry, I think it's a hearing, sorry. But it's open to the public. But the homeowner comes and basically can present their case. We had one recently where the homeowner basically said that their property had been gutted, the pipes had been sold, and they made some arrangements with the architect to try and preserve some of the features. Unfortunately, they didn't come for the first meeting, so we imposed the delay. They came for our second meeting, and they basically argued that they were doing a good effort. You know, they had tried to list the property to be sold, and they couldn't get any buyers, so we released the delay. They tore it down, and they're building a new structure. So.
But this was a property that was on a historic register?
It was on the index, yes.
Right, so just say hypothetically, I own a home on Foster Street that's 70 years old. The commission comes forward and deems that it's now a historical home. I have the right to petition to the commission, say I don't want it designated as a historical home, and then we have a hearing about it?
No.
No.
Okay.
No, so we can inventory, currently we can inventory anything we want.
Okay.
In which case it adds it to the inventory. If you decide to destroy the home, you would apply for a demolition permit through the building office.
Okay.
It's at the time that you apply for your demolition permit, does the Chapter 65 kick in which case the building inspector looks up to see today if it's inventoried. Hopefully moving forward, he'll just look at the year of creation, and if it's greater than 50 years, it will trigger 65.
Okay. What if I don't want that restriction put on my home?
Well, technically, the house could be put on the register at any point after 50 years.
Don't buy an old home.
So that's the thing. I mean, if at any point, it has to be paid to have somebody put it on the register. So that's why usually we pick, with the consultant that we've had recently doing the historical inventory, you pick the older homes and the more significant homes. But technically, any house that's older than 50 years old can be put on the historic register. And then if you want to tear it down after 50 years. So we don't have any jurisdiction on that, though.
There's a fine point you're making there. There's nothing younger than 50 years old can be put on the historic register.
Right.
That doesn't mean every home over 50 years is.
Correct.
So that's when you said this is out of our hands, the state set it. Now, the state set a limit, you can't do anything younger than 50.
Correct.
They didn't say go ahead and deem everything over 50 years old.
And I don't think this commission would at all deem everything in this town.
Well, nor do I think they should have the authority to do
Well,
that.
we wouldn't do that.
We act under a basic tenet of government, which is we try to protect what doesn't normally have a protector. So in this case, it's historical resources. It's like clean air and clean water. It's something that doesn't really do a good job defending for itself, so we defend on its behalf.
Sure. Would the Historic Commission consider doing this piecemeal? That is, an amendment only addressing the 18 months and then coming back and pursuing an amendment associated with the automatic listing at 50 years? The reason I ask that is that I think the two issues are getting convoluted here and complicated. So I want to know if you're willing to consider that so that we can sort of take them one at a time in a more incremental.
In my mind, I would, because we really didn't want this to focus on the 50 years. That was, the real focus is on extending the 6 months, which is, many towns have said is ineffective. And that's really the focus. So I personally would be willing to not deal with the age at this time point. I don't know how other people feel.
And I'll tell you, I agree that 6 months is ineffective to find a proper custodian for a property if that's your charge or waiting. I'm not sure 18 months, that jump is, case has been made in my mind, but I would think a year is a reasonable amount of time to determine, I mean, whether or not you have the resources to do it, whether you've checked out all the available funding sources. Beyond that, I'm not sure what you gain between 12 months and 18 months other than just keeping the property owner from doing what they want. I mean, I think a year would give you the time to, assuming you have a plan that you address, a boilerplate plan for every of these projects that come forward. I don't know what that is. Can someone describe what your plan is when, say you get a property put before you that's proposed for demolition, and you need to make the determination of whether to preserve it. Okay, say you made the determination it's worthy of, under your current bylaw. What's your process for trying to preserve that?
So currently, we review the literature. We often involve the society to help us research things like the deeds on that property. And then every property is unique, so we take them on a case-by-case basis. I think that, when you talk about that 18-month delay, so the first thing is you have to realize that as the town commission, we cannot get involved officially until someone makes that delay request. So that's the first important thing. So that's sort of when our clock starts. Number two is, the owner has the ability to be actively involved and engaged, and they could sell the house, it could be moved, things like that. That is allowed.
But once you determine it has value, do you have a protocol you follow? All right, here's the steps we're going to do. On the first month, we're gonna tap into these resources. Then we're gonna go here, and then we're gonna do that. We're gonna check with the whatever it is. Grant opportunities, state agency. I mean, do you have a protocol so that you're working against the clock?
You pretty much stated our protocol, which is...
Is that something that's available online or that we can get a copy of so we can see what process you follow?
So again, we probably don't have it formally written down because we take it on a case-by-case basis. Because each property is unique and where it's located matters, and the possible reuse cases matter. If it's way outside of the center of town versus right downtown, I mean, these are all things that we have to consider. So, or, you know, what's going to go there? You might remember the Long Store. So the Long Store was situated where the Point is today, and that's an example where we had to get creative. So, you know, it's actually disassembled.
I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
Well, we try to work with realtors, we try to work with the owner. It's just, and look at grants and look at CPC funds, which we're looking at now for a property.
But the time is so short, like with the.
Well, that's what, I think that's precisely where your argument needs to be made. If 6 months isn't enough, you need to be able to demonstrate why it isn't enough, and if what increments add more opportunity for you, rather than just, I think it's just, it sounds arbitrary to say, well, 6 months isn't enough, so if we go to 18, then we'll be okay.
Well,
why?
So I think that also, we don't want to say it out loud because it's painful for all of us, but, you know, many of us have served multiple terms on the commission. I'm probably in my 7th or 8th year, and we've lost everything, except for the Long Store, which is disassembled.
In a trailer.
In a trailer. So I think the largest statement we could possibly make to you is that we're losing, that these houses are being destroyed, that 6 month actually works into the contractor's demolition plan brilliantly because it moves you from winter to spring. And also, if you look at Massachusetts towns that have successfully saved structures, they're mostly in that 18-month range. I think Cape Cod is probably a good example. There's a Cape Cod Commission. They automatically register every demolition permit. They publicize it on their website. They invite people to come. They move stuff. They get all these kinds of things done. Don't also forget that as a town commission, we have a budget of $700. We've had the same budget for many, many years. Our major source of funding is the CPA. And so the opportunities that we have as a town board is very limited.
What doesn't prevent you from asking for more? I mean, I know in the past when there was proposals, thoughtful proposals to devote more money to hire outside resources to do the inventories came up, they were fully supported. So
we're using monies that are fractional of the cost actually purchasing or moving one of these historic structures. I mean, sure, we've asked for $10,000, we've asked for $20,000 for feasibility, inventories, you know, gravestone preservation, but we haven't ever gone to the CPA and said we need $600,000-$800,000 to purchase and there.
But rather than coming in and asking for $600,000, how about establishing an annual funding mechanism that helps you build toward that number so that you could buy a property when it came up, and then put a deed restriction on it, and then turn around and sold it and replenish it. Now, there's a model that works for preserving housing without just saying, you know, there's nothing we can do about it, we're getting beat, let's put more burden on the property owner. I mean, it's being proactive. I just think that, I would echo the earlier comments by the chairman and others, that maybe it's time to look at the historic district again, too. And, you know, and again, that should be an opportunity for being creative and cooperative rather than just putting, you know, personally speaking, and just my observation of what works experientially is just putting restrictions on people doesn't always have the intended consequences. People find a way to get around that.
It's funny you say that. I think our revision of Chapter 65 after 17 years is us being proactive. So I guess we'll agree to disagree.
Well, I could just visit Mr. Knox and Mr. Curtis are waiting patiently, so Mr. Knox.
I'm confused. What currently triggers you to work on 65?
The property's inventory.
But say I own a house that's 90 years old. I mean, when do you get involved in that? Say it's not inventory. This is just a question. I don't. I'm missing something.
Today, if the property you live in is 90 years old and it's not inventoried, your request for demolition will be granted.
Okay. And you're willing to take out the 50 years, or do you want to put it in a certain amount of years? I have no problem with the concept that you're going with at all. But I just wanted a more basic
idea of how it gets started? Does it have to be 50 years?
So I would argue, and I think Linda made a very valid point, that we don't need the 50 years. I agree with her. We're willing to strike the 50 years. However, I think there should be clarity. That means that we will be annually doing our inventories so that as properties age in place, they are properly included. You know, there was maybe 10 or 15 years between inventories, which let a whole bunch of properties lapse into this period. And so, yeah, we had some pretty old, you know, way older than 50 years. We had closer to 75, 80-year-old properties that were not inventoried that were at risk. And so, as long as there's understanding that we strike the 50-year thing, we're going to be asking annually to do an inventory to keep it up to date so that we can
I'd be
keep our
bolder than
infrastructure.
that and develop a plan, and I'd support you in it and work with you on it to vote. You know, at some point at the time, the property's going to be important enough, and there's not going to be an outside resource to buy it. So if you have funds in place, you're not going to be able to do this annually, probably, but, you know, it's a lot cheaper, you know, one home than it is 11-acre tracts of land that we've been looking at, that sort of thing. Whether it's through CPA funding or some of the other capital funds that we retain, start building a kitty so that you're in a position to say, all right, now one is on our clock, we've got to, you know, whatever it is, 12 months or 18 months to work with to find it. We'll try all those outside resources. If they don't work out, then it isn't just a delay in time. You know, we say, well, if it's that important to us, we'll buy it ourselves. And then as I say, you don't buy it to own it, you buy it to put a deed restriction on it and then flip it over, and then you protect it.
So, everything you said makes a lot of sense, but I want to remind the board that I was here maybe 5 years ago with the Long Store, making a pretty compelling argument about its historical significance. And the board pretty much hammered me on the basic concepts of things like...
For the record, I was not there then.
How do you plan to, you know, if you bring this under town ownership, you know, how do you plan to do maintenance and electricity and all these
I don't want to get into that right now.
other
We're doing something
things?
else that's in front of us right now. Mr. Gerber, give some.
Just a couple clarifying questions for you. Right now, you have 6 months to take action. How much of that 6 months is consumed by standard meetings and a deliberative process as compared to the amount of time where you can start to take active measures to preserve the property? You know, are we talking 2 weeks and then you can start to take active measures, or are we taking 5 months before you can start to take active measures as part of that process? Because I see in here certain time, you have to take certain actions within 60 days, but 60 days out of a 180-day window could be a meaningful amount of time. So how much is spent on those administrative tasks?
Right, so typically the rules are all written where the administrative timing is up front, and then the delay is actually imposed after the hearing.
Okay.
And then at that point in time, you know, it's our real hope that, you know, we never impose a full delay, right? We just have the hearing, we hear what the demolition plan is, because there's a request for a formal proposal of what the reuse case is. And, you know, traditionally, the owners have gotten engaged, and again, you know, we did vote for one because the owner did not come, and then they came the next meeting, they proposed reuse that we were comfortable with, and we lifted the delay. That's the important thing, we can vote to lift the delay at any point.
And if I could follow that up with a second, somewhat unrelated question. When you go through the process of inventorying a property, what is the property owner's involvement in that inventorying process? Nothing to do with the demolition, just the inventory.
They have no role.
They have no role.
It's just, it's called, I forget what it's called, there's a term for it, where like, we have a consultant who just inventoried 100 some odd properties. It's on the road. They do not go onto the property, they look at it from the road and make an assessment.
The property owner made aware at some point that their house will be or was listed on an inventory?
Not that I know of.
No. That's not standard procedure, but it's not something that we would be opposed to. We could very easily send folks a letter that says their house was inventoried.
As someone who.
I would very much, oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
As someone who has a house built in 1860, I would love to know if my house has been inventoried.
Just state your name and your address.
Jamie, and it's 410 Newtown Road. It's the
We
old
can
yak
let you know.
farmhouse.
I mean, I think this is unrelated to this topic, but
Yeah,
I
but it's
would
interesting.
lose my mind if I bought a house and it wasn't inventoried, and then I went to go sell it, and it was inventoried, and no one told me about it in the process. That would be a really big problem.
Well, again, having it inventoried and buying it and selling it is not relevant. It's only relevant if you try to tear it down.
Understood. Mr. Mullen.
A couple things. So, Ed Mullen, 10 Grist Mill, Chairman of the Planning Board, also happened to be a building inspector for the town of Concord, which I would state is probably one of the most historically significant towns in our nation. And we have a 1-year demo delay bylaw in Concord that we enforce. We also, I worked for the city of Newton before that, which had a 1-year demo delay bylaw. It's hard to enforce. Sometimes I can also tell you that as a developer, I got caught up in the demo delay bylaw where we were renovating a historic structure. We could only demo up to 50%. Unbeknownst to us, the owner of the property before us tore the garage off, which was historic as well. So we went beyond. They shut us down for 6 months, put our names in the front of the paper, what a bad builder we were, everything else. And then when we did a little more historical research, it turns out the house was not on a register, nor did they have any jurisdiction. So there are times when these errors occur. I would want these people that are commissioned to do this to be diligent when they are assessing the houses, to put them on a register. I'd also like to say that I am in favor of a district, and if the zoning, as a planning board, can help you guys establish a district through zoning, I encourage you to come to before us, show us an area you'd want to preserve in whole, and we could do it as a zoning bylaw.
Thank you.
Can I say
Just
something?
so people know,
Yeah.
just let me just say one thing.
No,
There's a
no,
Macris.
No. Please. Go, Mr.
Well, I do want to push back against the idea that a district is less arbitrary than a 50-year cutoff. One is simply defined by geography, the other is just defined by a year. If we have a district, you're automatically thrown in. If we have a 50-year cutoff, you're automatically thrown in. I'd have to think some more about how I feel about that. I'm a little curious, though, to see the support, full tacit support anyway, for a district, and the pushback against the 50-year, because in my mind, they're both cutoffs with some information behind them. The district based on some use, the 50 years based on some history. So I know that's not exactly what we're going at here, but I do see them being reasonably similar.
Please.
What I was trying to say is, there is a database that's public, it's called MACRIS, M-A-C-R-I-S. You can look it up, anyone can look it up, it's the Massachusetts Historical Commission. It will tell you what each property in each town that is inventoried. So that information is publicly available, just so people know.
And also, just to clarify one other point, in this town, the building inspector has the diligence of checking. So when it's done through the building office. So if someone comes and requests a permit for demolition to the building inspector, Roland then looks up the property to see if it's registered. And if it is registered, then they notify the commission at that point. And we don't make the determination, he does.
No more comments. I think it's a great topic that deserves a lot of discussion, and I'm not opposed to you coming forward here, finding better ways to make your mission work. I want to also make your mission work. You know, that's where I come from on this.
So to close this up, if we remove the 50-year provision and leave the rest of the document as is, we would like to submit that to the warrant for Article 22.
I'd be willing to take a look at that.
Personally, I'm not sure the case has been made that it needs to jump from 6 months to 18. I'd like to see some surety that, what are those, 1 month or 3 month increments engaged in terms of a protection process, or is it just punitive time? If it's punitive time, then that's not helping anything. But if it's actual time that's that's helping a process of protecting it. You know, I can see 6 months clearly not being enough, but I can also see maybe a year is enough, and I'm yet to be sold that 18 months has been demonstrated to me. But I just think, I'll agree with what the chairman said, you know, on the general principle. I want to support a bylaw. I also want to support a more vigorous approach to giving you more tools to do your job.
I don't believe that there is any way to really answer your question. The challenge is literally, there are towns that do 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and there seems to be more houses saved in towns that have the 18 months, but there is no database that I know of that actually would provide you with that data that you're looking for.
Mr. Chairman, I would say that my perspective is I would be happy to put it on the warrant either at 12 or 18 months, but I don't necessarily know how I would vote between 12 or 18 months. To the extent, though, that the Historic Commission is firmly in favor of bringing it forward at 18 months, I think you have a much harder argument to make at town meeting if it says 18 months as opposed to 12 months. I would still be willing to put it on the...
I'd be willing to put it on the warrant no matter what terms you want. I just believe you have a right to make your case. I just want us to end up in a place where we're all in agreement. And we're not there yet, but...
I just want to applaud you for making the move toward this, because you put the time in to make the changes that you did. And I want to see it on the warrant too, and I have to make up my mind whether it be 12 months or 18 months.
The testimony of Mr. Mullen is compelling to me, with Concord especially, being such a historic community, not just in the Commonwealth, but in the nation. Did you guys debate
Acton is
the difference
equally
between 12 months and 18 months?
historic.
Pardon me?
Acton is equally historic as Concord, and they have an 18-month demolition delay.
But how do they use their time differently? I want to dig down. What's magic about those numbers? What do you do with that extra 6 months? Are there more doors you knock on? Are there things you're not eligible for in 12 months, but you would be in 18 months? You know, I'd be comfortable with the process that substantiates that.
Well, I think
I want to be comfortable with it.
I don't think that evidence really is easily gleaned, except, yes, we've done our research. You know, we have lists of the local towns and their delays, everything from 6 months to 18 months. It's within scope. It's not like we're asking for 18 months and the entire state of Massachusetts is at 6 months, right? We're within the ballpark here. And we came to this through research. And so, you know, if there was an extra 6 months, yeah, there's more rocks to turn over, there's more grants to write, there's more to do.
So, appreciate the effort. I wouldn't call Chatham or Amesbury local, but with a zoning, talk about the 40B projects that come before us, and they come for an extension. So they get 12-month extension to be able to make significant improvements to be able to retain their 40B status. The zoning board of appeals just extended the farms, the Kimball Farms, I guess it is now, a 6-month extension for the 40B project at the Common, behind back in Toyota. Is there anything restricting you from, if you went with 12 months, is there anything restricting you if someone came to and you saw that they were making significant improvement for extending them? That would actually works the other way around.
It works the other way around.
To us, yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. But if someone came to us and is making significant improvement at 18 months, we could let them demolish it. 2 months, we can lift it at any time.
Yeah, right.
That's the key point. You just figured it out. It's the reverse.
Still, the testimony of Acton, I mean, of Concord and Newton.
I would note that
as far as my vote is concerned on town meeting floor, I'm with my colleagues. I couldn't tell you how I'm going to vote on it. I have no problem with putting it forward. You guys are the commission that put the work and the effort into it. Appreciate you coming forward and presenting this to us. I do think that it would be better for you all to take the 50 years out of there. I'm sorry.
I would say that comparing a moratorium in Concord versus a moratorium in Littleton is significant as much because of the name recognition that Concord has. So, you know, preserving anything in Concord historically, I would imagine, is a touch easier than preserving something in Littleton, simply because of the name Concord. So, it's not always an apples to apples comparison.
Mr. Muller. To speak to the 50 years, though, Concord does have anything before 1941. So a little more than 50 years, but still. They did set a hard date.
Does that roll year after year?
They're talking about it. It hasn't moved in the year that I've been there, but it's debated. And, you know, they're pretty rigorous in the Historic Commission in Concord. So, again, I'm all, as a citizen of this town, I'm in favor of what they are proposing as far as a delay. It's just my experience as a building enforcement agent, a zoning enforcement agent for the city of Newton prior. The 12 months seems to be, when I look from both sides of that counter, a more fair and less arbitrary number. If you do find it historically significant, right, you can then impose more restrictions at that point, you know, and say, you know, after 12 months, we're working on it. You could say if it's deemed historically significant, it goes along. I don't know. I mean, there's ways to work around it, but I would think that in 12 months, we should be able to come up with a solution as a town.
So, just to clarify one point, in Littleton, the way this rule currently is written, we have to define it historically significant to get any delay. So what you just said is not how it works here. So if we do not determine it to be historically significant, then the permit is issued immediately.
I guess our advice then would be to make that amendment. Am I reading the board correctly there? Make the amendment relative to 50 years.
Our role is really here just to put it on the warrant and not put it on the warrant, but anecdotally, individually, I think we could each, you've heard us speak, you know, and I don't know, if we decide to have a further hearings, Keith, I don't know, would it be appropriate for the commission to hold their own hearing on it, or because it's on the warrant, would it be one of our items to hold a hearing?
Well, somebody should hold a hearing unless we want to have most of the town meeting time taken up on this.
Right.
So,
We are Article 22, so I think we're going to come pretty late.
You have thought about this a little bit.
No, I didn't pick 22. I would have picked 1.
The selectmen haven't ordered the articles yet, so.
You can be influenced. Get you up to 21.
I just, you know, to accomplish something I'd like to move or do whatever we need to do to agree to put the warrant article on there and then encourage the Historic Commission to both be open to us scheduling a hearing on it and to be open to some changes.
Yeah, I guess the key would be that if you want to hold it, if the selectmen wanted to hold a public hearing on it with an eye to perhaps amending the article in its form before it's inserted on the warrant, then we should do the hearing on the 12th of March. If you simply want to put it in the warrant as is and then hold a hearing where you may or may not have a motion that is different than what the article is, then you could do it at a later date, such as the 26th. But I think my recommendation would be to have a hearing on the 13th, on the 12th of March. Yeah, it will be our town meeting night. Our town meeting prep night.
You guys can put that machine going upstairs.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
March 12th.
All the tough questions have already been asked.
Yeah, it's a way for us to vet it, and if there are concerns in the community, that people can come forward and say so. But in the meantime, we'll be able to get a notice. The notice won't appear in the newspaper until Friday before the Monday hearing, though. That's the only problem.
Word will get out, too.
The word will get out. We'll put it, we'll tweet it. Anthony will send out to all of the people who subscribe to our website, so everyone will know about it.
Love to tweet it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate all the effort. The passion. All right. I can go.
Thank you.
You still got a little one here? You're okay with that, Tracy?
She's gone, yeah.
All right. All right, so next up, why don't we bring the Newtown Road tax title property? Mr. Jeffries, if you want to come up. Sure. Attorney. You have to sing the national anthem into this microphone.
Sorry, hi, Brett Jeffries, 3 Manchester Lane, or Drive, sorry, and just here to talk about the abutter program. So I know that there's, from our last time we met, there's been a change and it's not going to be included for the special town, for the town meeting, and just wanted to clarify what's going to be written and to make sure that
One of your butters, is it?
Yes, another butter.
All right, I mean, we went through this in the fall, and appreciate you kind of working with us in the fall, and I think this town meeting kind of accommodated us and allowed us to bring you back for the annual. And I'm going to open it up if anybody has any.
Well, maybe somebody, Keith or Mr. Jeffries, can recap this for us?
Yeah, just when we last left this tax title property, town meeting in October voted to carve out the 2 areas that you see in yellow here. Unfortunately, I can't point to them. These 2 4,800 square foot lots were carved out, and the remainder of the lot has not been disposed of yet. Of those, well, the remainder that's between the Yap property and those 2 yellow lots, as well as the panhandle that goes out to Newtown Road, that still remains in tax title status. So the purpose of bringing the matter back to this town meeting is to be able to act on the request that we had for the portion that's shown in red there. Is that 10 by 20? 10
by 126?
32?
It's in, working off the 2 electronic copies here, hold on. But another question that I had was whether, and Mr. Jeffries' property abuts the red portion. There's also that strip could also continue all the way out to Newtown, and it abuts the adjoining, right? It abuts the adjoining property. So if there is interest by that abutter, we could put both.
That's up me.
Yeah, we could put both of those in the article. For what's happened since then, since the October town meeting, the lot abutting 416 Newtown Road is proceeding. The lot abutting 414 is not. That the owner of 416 Newtown did enter, did follow up with the procedure for the abutters lot sale, put in a proposal. The treasurer has been working with them. The plan, the engineered plan is being worked on to be able to subdivide it, or to do an A&R plan with the planning board. But Steve Venuti, the treasurer, indicated that he has not heard further word from 414. What that might mean, for example, is that if the yellow portion that is the higher up on the screen, which is therefore north, that one right there won't be going to anyone. So it would be, it could go to the Conservation Commission.
So when does that abutter have to execute? I'm not sure that we put it.
We didn't put a deadline yet. The article as was originally written said that if either of those properties were not secured, or title was not transferred by a date certain, I go back and look at it, what it was, it would go to the Conservation Commission. The reason we took that out is we didn't give anything to the Conservation Commission. We took that whole thing out there. The article that I've written and drafted for this town meeting addresses that, and I think it might be in a way that's satisfactory, and that is, it would say that it would create 2 more lots. One of them is 1,260 square feet, abutting 3 Manchester Drive, and the other is, and we'll have to do the numbers, how many square feet abutting 410 Newtown Road. And further, that the care, custody, and control of the residual goes to the Conservation Commission, and that if either of those 2 new parcels, A or B in this article, or of Article 11 from the October town meeting, if any of those are unsold by, and the date that's offered here is October 1st, 2018, then those would go also to the Conservation Commission. So I guess the answer would be setting a deadline of this coming October 1st for, as when all 4 of these parcels would have to move. And if any of them don't move by then, they would go to the Conservation Commission. But that follows the text of the original article. I mean, the notion of setting a deadline and having it go to conservation was something that we had come up with originally.
Yeah, the only thing the only subject to date there is whether that's the right date, October.
Yeah, it could be,
December 31st.
Did you discuss that with the Conservation Administrator? Did you have it on some point?
I have had updates with her, and I think just to be sure that we're all on the same page, we would want to re-engage with the Conservation Commission. I can't represent here tonight that Conservation is in favor of this article.
No, I just want to be aware.
I think that we're following the guidelines that the rules of engagement with Conservation that we came along with before. And as a practical matter, it might be worth noting that if it's the case that the parcel that abuts 14 Newtown Road does not get transferred to that property, then you'll have a bit of a transition from coming out from Newtown and going along the corridor there, and then you can just cut right across there instead of having a very narrow corridor for the whole way. So that may be to the benefit overall, especially the 2
We're on camera.
New requests. So. But we can draft up fill in the blanks for an article that allows both of the abutters to go after the.
And the paperwork is all set, the application is submitted for 3 Manchester, or can be in short order, is that?
I'd have to go back and see.
I know we had like an original version, and we had an amended version, and I don't remember.
I think we want to make sure, we can work with the property owners, looking butters, to make sure we have the paperwork in place that we need.
Do we expect that's a final decision on 414, or we just don't know?
Well, we went out to bid, we set a deadline, and they submitted nothing by the deadline.
Okay, so they didn't come back and say, we're not interested anymore?
No. I'm fine with this. I think this is generally what we agreed to. Not generally, this is precisely what we agreed to, with the exception of adding the dates, which is
Yeah, so I think we're going to talk about what a reasonable date is. December 31st maybe is 2018. It's, people tend to purchase property before the end of the calendar year, so it's not unreasonable. There's no magic about it, either of the dates.
Could I offer one additional suggestion before we get to the date piece? Could we take the proceeds of this sale and put it, since we are coughing up what otherwise could be conservation space, put it in the what was the?
Fund.
The fund.
Brand.
And principally because
Fund.
we're talking about a few $1,000s here that could ultimately go towards an assessment of other property in town. Now, I don't know if
Can it be
we can
marked?
do that through,
Have to go and
Probably
check
has to go to
that.
the general
I mean,
fund,
they-
probably.
Yeah.
does it have to go straight to?
But we can
I-
reappropriate symbolically that
Sure.
amount.
Yeah.
It very much is a symbolic
It's
sum of money.
absolutely.
but-
It's a good idea.
Not all of
Very
those
good.
bases.
Jane?
Can I just ask a question as far as an abutter, what the steps are that we need to, I know that my neighbors have, I think, put in an application at town hall. Last time that we were here, I think one of our main concerns was just lack of information from you guys as to what was going on, and we still have never heard anything. I heard about this meeting tonight from my neighbor. So maybe I don't know where on the website to look and find what's going on. But if I could have information from somebody as to what this.
Yeah, the
that would be very
applications are
helpful.
made to the treasurer's office, and we
So I
can.
just walk in there and they'll
You
know
can
what
just-
to
They'll know
do?
what you're talking about.
That you can just walk in, and that, for anyone that's interested in acquiring one of these properties, that they file an application with the treasurer. We can, if you don't have that application form, we can make sure that you have it. But that really is, that's the key for engagement in the whole process.
And is there a timeline?
Because we have to have some, I mean, we're putting ourselves out on a limb here to go to town meeting, to ask people, to ask the town to give up land that could be set aside for open space purposes and make it useful for an abutting property.
I mean, I can do
So-
that tomorrow, but I just need to know what to do. So I walk into the
Useful
treasurer's
to know
office
before the warrant.
Second floor, right above us.
Yeah.
and they know what to do.
Gotcha.
And it's a, 2 or 3 page application, it's not onerous.
And they absolutely, they know what to do.
Okay, because sometimes I've walked into offices and gotten shuffled around and people don't always know.
If you have any trouble, go up to the 3rd floor, find that guy.
We'll get to what you need. We got a low jack on him, we can track it down.
And in turn, as far as timeline is concerned, we need to put this on the article on the town warrant by next Board of Selectmen.
26th.
By the 16th, by the 12th, rather.
Yeah, so you
So
really get
submit your
it.
submit your application this week, and then
We can include
the
it
article
in your
could be
article.
amended and so forth.
2 red lines, Brett.
Yeah, and just, I'll submit another application just to make sure it's in this calendar year.
Perfect.
So I sidetracked our discussion at the end, sorry about that.
No,
No,
and,
it's all good.
so, and the only other question would be the date, and, you know, what, so if you could set it as a year from now?
I think you made sense getting it done in the calendar year is a good idea.
December
Yeah,
31st of
clean the books.
2018, sound reasonable? Sounds reasonable to each of us.
You said it's $1 a square foot? 'Cause, I mean, how much it costs makes the difference.
It's about,
If you go to the town website, under the treasurer's department, there's a drop-down menu, there's 2 links, sale of town-owned property and a butter lot sales program. With a drop-down menu that gives you the whole rundown
There's the
of the
application
procedure.
too.
I didn't see the application.
And if I look at town maps, and is that gonna give me accurate?
As long as you go to the
like,
treasurer's office first, you'll end
semi-accurate
up there.
Yeah.
boundary lines for calculating square footage?
plus or minus a couple feet, yeah.
Which is fine, but semi-accurate.
Steve will be able to calculate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd actually have Chris Stoddard do the map.
The director
Have
of
the
the highway
DPW director
will
do the map.
do a GIS map and maybe a plus minus a couple of feet.
Yeah, and we,
I mean, I have a survey that's less than a year old, so,
That takes into account.
well, my property line. but
Okay,
not-
so it would be basically that side lot line for you times 10, I would assume,
right,
right?
because, well,
Or
we're
what, 10
we're
feet?
presuming that if we're gonna do 10 feet for one, that we would do 10 feet for both.
Yeah, I should make it clear, that would be the extent that I would,
Like
more
showing
than that would be
Yeah.
something of that.
That's what's going on. think we're good.
Yes.
We have a plan.
We have a
We have a game plan, so.
What do you think, Counselor?
Yeah. It's your expectation. And thank you for attempting to adjust.
Yeah, tell us where the swing set is going.
We'll see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, it looks like the assessors say your lot line is 138 feet.
138 feet?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Good luck.
Tracy.
Tracy, thank you for your patience. Tracy, thank you for your patience.
Oh, yeah,
Appreciate you
sure.
doing that. All right, so, let's see, which article are we, 21?
Yeah, put the petition up on the screen here.
So this is easier to read. Town bylaw amendment. Chapter 140, plastic checkout bag reduction. You're up.
Yep, that's it. I'm Tracy Cutter. I'm over at Hartwell Ave, 72 Hartwell Ave. I'm working with Monterey Oliver on this. And we think there are too many plastic bags around. You see them everywhere. You see them on the trees during the winter, and this time of year when we've got this early spring happening, they're everywhere around, as well as all kinds of plastic litter and other litter. So it's one small dent to we try to reduce some of the plastic bags. It's one small dent in the plastic trash that is out there, but there is a lot of it. And we think it's important to start making a dent in it and phase out some of these plastic bags. The grocery store, the single-use plastic bags, the average time that they're used for is 12 minutes per bag. So they're really throwaway bags. You can recycle them. Not that many people do, and they're a recycling industry's nightmare. They end up in their machines, tangled up in their machines. So recyclers in general hate plastic bags. It's very hard to deal with them. And very few recyclers now even try to recycle plastic bags. So there are now 61 towns in Massachusetts that have some kind of plastic bag bylaw, some kind of limit or outright ban. And we also, some of the surrounding towns are planning to put a law in place this spring. Westford is got something going for their town meeting in March, and Acton is going to be putting something out in the fall. So we think it's time for Littleton, and there is the state has been working on a statewide ban, but it has been in committee for a long time, well over a year, and it could be a couple more years. So we think the time is right to go forward with it, with a ban. And I don't know if you want me to get into the details of what it would be. Basically, we're asking that town meeting members vote to allow retail establishments in Littleton to give only paper bags and certain criteria around the paper bags, or bring your own bag, or a cloth bag if they were going to hand out a cloth bag, which of course they're not really going to, but so basically you could bring any bag you want. You can bring your own bag or a paper bag. It would be a 100% recyclable bag and a few other criteria, no old tree growth, things like that. But we have looked at a lot of the other bylaws that have been passed around Massachusetts, and we think we've got a plan that makes sense and is reasonable and manageable for retailers in Littleton. We don't want to put anyone out of business. We don't want to torture businesses. But we think it's an important environmentally responsible thing to do, and we think it's manageable for the businesses. Some of the retailers of the grocery stores are kind of waiting to see what happens with the state. They would like a state law passed so that it's similar throughout, town to town, especially if they're running different if they're running a business throughout multiple towns. So they'd like some consistency across towns, but we won't see that statewide limit passed for probably a year or two, or maybe not at all. So we think the best way to clean up Littleton at this point is to just move forward. It's very similar to the statewide bill that would be passed, if it were to be passed. So we're hoping to get it on the town warrant for May.
And you just need 10 voters' signatures to get it
I
on.
think so, yeah.
And Tracy had worked with the board's approval, had worked with town council on the form of the article. That's why it had been expressed to me by board members that you'd like to have the retail establishments in town see the document. We do plan to get it out. It was being finalized right up until, I think, Wednesday or Thursday. We got the final form in time for the packet. But if you're asked to vote tonight to schedule a hearing on this petition, and then we'll send out that hearing notice along with the text to all of the retail establishments so that they're aware of it and have a chance to come here 2 weeks from tonight and offer any input along with the public.
I'm all in favor of that, having the hearing in a couple of weeks, and applaud your efforts. A couple of years ago when I was working with the Sustainability Committee on Earth Day doing the recycling, this topic came up, and I know it was spoken about, at least at that time, in terms of at least initially trying to do a voluntary effort. So I don't know if there's been any, I want you to tell me whether or not there's been any direct approach to retailers and how that went down, and then I have another question too.
Sure, yeah, we have talked with Donnellan's, and we've talked to Market Basket, and talked to another small business in the town center. And they're looking for the state to pass
Okay.
the bill.
Now, at the same time, as you say, other communities have passed this.
Yeah.
So there are retailers who are dealing with it.
Yeah.
What's the experience on the ground in those communities?
It's gone pretty well.
Okay, how do they handle it?
There are suppliers out there. Every bill is a little bit different.
Yeah.
So some of the bylaws have allowed for compostable bags. Some have just gone with paper. They're all a little different, but they've all. It hasn't been. It's been manageable. It's been reasonable. It's been
So I'm
manageable.
assuming these are all towns that have CVS's and market baskets, just like we do, right?
Yeah. Many have a lot more businesses than we do. And in fact, Market Basket and Donnellan's, they each have, they have experience with it. Market Basket especially. Lincoln, Donnellan's has one in Lincoln. I think Lincoln has got their.
According to the website, Lincoln has a proposed.
Proposed, okay, yeah. So this area is starting to see this bylaw coming now.
I would think, just as advice between now and the hearing date, it would probably be useful to a lot of folks to know as much as they could about how it's been dealt with in practice.
Yeah.
Whether there was gloom and doom predicted by retailers who have consequently dealt with it handily, and and whether people really can measure the difference in the landscape.
Right. Right.
Sure. I just have one comment about, on the voter petition article, it says that you're asking people to support a bylaw to limit the distribution of plastic bags at checkout counters. And then within the actual article, under section 3, it's basic, under regulated conduct, no retail establishment in the town of Littleton shall provide plastic bags to consumers. So are we looking to limit or prohibit at retail at the checkout counter?
Prohibit everything but recyclable paper bags.
Okay.
Or cloth bags that they could hand out, but.
Okay. So on the petition it says limit, so really you're looking to not prohibit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my only comment.
There would still be some plastic bags allowed. There are some exemptions, like produce bags.
Right.
They could still have produce, newspaper bags.
Right.
So there are a few other things, dry cleaning.
Okay.
But yeah, prohibit.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I have a question about the severability clause of this. If the state is looking at implementing a statewide law, would it make sense to include a severability clause that sunsets this once the state implements something? Otherwise, now we have two things that are slightly different, and it becomes a law that we don't need.
Actually,
is that something other people are doing?
We wouldn't even have the law at that point, because the state law as it's set up now, unless it's changed, it does change. It seems to change it every time it goes through a committee. But at this point, if the state law passed, then it would be null and void. So
the state law would govern.
The state law would govern, yeah. They are allowing people to then, after the state law would govern, the town bylaws would not.
Universally, even if ours was more stringent than the state's?
Universally, yeah. We could come back at that point and then create a new bylaw saying we want to go further, but the state would kind of take over.
I'd like to just.
We can pose the question to town council. I wouldn't know what the answer is.
Oh, yeah, neither.
I wouldn't say take out the severability. The severability clause is mostly to do with if part of that bylaw, assuming nothing happens at the state level, and there's some ruling that comes down that declares that some part of this bylaw is not valid, we'd want to have the rest of the bylaw be valid.
Yeah, and perhaps that section wasn't the right place to put it.
But I think that if there were to be a statewide ban, I would imagine that we and other communities would want to look at whether our bylaw was redundant. But since you can only, it takes vote of town meeting and the approval of the Attorney General to amend your town bylaws, and that goes for rescinding them as well. So it's a multi-step process that we have to go through.
Which I guess is why I'm interested in it, is that if there's a way we can, once the state does this, if we can just as a.
I think we have to. I think we want to.
You could vote in, I assume, a sunset provision, but that, it's in effect for X number of years, but I wouldn't advocate that, but I would.
No, I don't.
No, yeah, I wouldn't advocate doing that.
I'd say that the wisest thing would be for any communities with the ban to see if and when the state adopts one statewide, and if they do, we will, each town will go and look and see if there's any part of our ban that still needs to be in place, or whether we can just bring it back to town meeting to rescind it.
Mr. Knox, any comments, questions?
I had the pleasure of talking to Marjorie about this personally. She gave me a disc on it too, and if you see some of the misuses of those bags and what they actually cause and where you find them in oceans and rivers and things like that, this is in my opinion, a worthwhile article. So definitely want to see it put on.
Okay.
We have also gone to the Board of Health and presented to the Board of Health and the Sustainability Committee. We've met with a couple of times too. So, and I'm sure we'll meet with other groups. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from them, which was really useful in just developing the draft.
So if we're going to be doing a hearing on it, Keith, we probably should make sure we are in touch with the Board of Health and the Sustainability Committee.
Tracy, if I could the only question I had was relative to implementation. I'm looking at January of 2019. So it's essentially 6 months from passing.
Yeah.
In communities that have passed a bylaw and implemented, is that the typical timeline?
Yeah, that's the typical timeline. It would be 6 months from the date of when the Attorney General approves it, or January 1st, whichever is later. But that timeline of 6 months should be good. It's worked for other communities. We're not the first. I think the first few communities may have had a little more trouble identifying suppliers that would have these bags. But at this point, It's only paper bags they need to find, and paper bags, this type of paper bag is very easy to find. Yeah, it's common at this point. So there's suppliers out there. And it would allow them to kind of use out their supply of plastic bags that they have now.
When there is a public hearing on this, I would be interested to hear the information that you can present on the life cycle analysis of plastic bags versus paper, because to be perfectly frank, I'm not a particularly big fan of this, because I think the life cycle energy assessments really don't bear out in its favor for most alternatives. And so I'd like to hear more. There's probably things I don't know. There are things that I'm missing. I'm sure you can give us better data sources, and I don't want to put you on the spot now, and I would like that information to be more publicly accessible than 9:30 at night. But that is my biggest concern, is that we just don't really get any bang for the buck, so to speak.
Okay. Yeah, plastic, there's a lot of reasons why the plastic is a problem. But yeah, we can talk about, you bring your own is always better. If you bring your own, that's just much better, because there are implications for, tons of paper bags.
Well, and here's what I mean when I say that. Bring your own isn't always better. If you're bringing a cloth bag and you're only using it 10 times, you would be far better off from an environmental perspective simply using a plastic bag. So the data and the information on that is what I'm particularly looking to understand. Where are our break-even points in terms of number of uses of a plastic bag? I mean, certainly I don't bring plastic bags home from the grocery store and throw them away. They end up in my waste paper baskets and multiple other purposes, doubling the environmental, or having, I suppose, the environmental cost of an individual bag. So those types of things, and looking at the life cycle assessment and energy consumption issues associated with paper. Paper's 10 times heavier than plastic, therefore costs almost 10 times as much energy to get it to a store as plastic. So how these things fit together is a very significant concern.
Okay.
Good comments, questions. Thank you very much for all the effort you put into this. Hope that the process was as painless as it could be. We did, we want to make sure that when somebody has a petition, they want to bring it forward, that you're able to do it as easily as possible, and I'm glad that you're able to use our town council services and make this
that was very helpful.
A deliverable article to bring to us. All right, so just a matter of us making a decision whether or not we want it placed on the warrant.
Yeah, it would be placed on the warrant upon receipt of petition signed by 10 voters, which we assume will happen without incident, and so once the town clerk certifies those signatures, gets inserted on the warrant with no action by the board. However, what we do want to do is have the board vote tonight to set a public hearing for the March 12th, and in fact, we now have 2 public hearings. I think we need to hold an idea that the first motion is for inserting articles, and we can go through that, but the second motion would pertain to this petition, schedule a hearing, and the third one would be to schedule a hearing for the Historic Commission's proposal.
Entertain motion number 2.
Move the Board of Selectmen vote to schedule a public hearing on Monday, March 12, 2018, on town bylaw amendment, plastic checkout bag reduction.
Second. It's moved and seconded.
Who is this?
Do we want to add something up, Paul? Moved and seconded. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
His comments are much more intelligent than mine.
Yeah, we're giving Diane a breakdown.
All right, so on March 12th, we'll have, as part of our Board of Selectmen meeting, we'll have a public hearing.
Okay.
So hopefully you can be there to answer any questions that folks might have. As far as motion 3 is concerned?
So the Board of Selectmen vote to schedule a public hearing on Monday, March 12, 2018, on the town bylaw amendment, historical significant building demolition requested by the Historical Commission.
Second.
She got some movement and second.
Yes.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay, great. And
Very good. As far as inserting articles tonight, I would ask that you vote to insert special town meeting number 4, which is the establishing a special injury leave. And
can you
yeah.
back up?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, police officer and firefighter are included in this.
Yeah, this is to accept a statute that was passed as part of the Municipal Modernization Act, which creates a whole new category, authorizing a community to set up a special fund to set money aside for any police officer or firefighter injured in the line of duty. And that seems like something we'd want to do, period.
There's nobody else that would fall under the umbrella of the Master Law.
No, Chapter 41, Section 111F is injured
That's all
police and fire.
That's all I wanted to
That's it. Okay.
I mean, like, this
So
is
that
the
would
town
be-
administrator has a day or something.
So moved. That's a different law.
Motion to insert has been made.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
All right. Then, if you are ready, the capital plan articles, as with the funding sources that Bonnie had gone through, we'd like to put that in the warrant, in that form. And
So
the
this-
text of the text of this Article 7 has a breakdown where I can pull up on the. Pull it up on the screen.
I'm fine with it.
Mr.
Should
Chairman,
we be doing this before the joint meeting or what?
I have no objection to it, I just haven't had a chance to study some of that.
Digest it.
Since we're going to meet next Tuesday, no problem, we can discuss it.
Sorry to
Yeah,
hold
we
that
can do
up.
that. No, that's fine.
I'm right there with it.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. And then let's see if we have anything left.
You have that motion about the chairman of the planning board, is that somewhere in here?
We're gonna double his pay, right?
Next title.
Or have it, are we gonna have his pay? I don't know.
Same number.
Let's see. And I don't think we have,
amount you get.
I don't think we have any more to do then tonight, because the tax title one, we're looking to get finalized, and we'll vote
Okay.
on it next
Let's-
time.
let's get
Same with the
into-
same with historical, if the hearing that you hold causes you to, want to change 18 months to 12, or get rid of the 50 years or whatever, that you.
All right, you had me at hello, let's go
Yeah, right.
to item 6B. All right, 6A. Green communities, right?
6A, this is, and there's a revised motion, it's the motion we had ready, but it didn't get in the packet, but it's really good news. First off, I want to commend the staff, led by Diane Dickerson, putting together a great year-end report for year 2 of our Green Communities grant. We spent all $250,000 that we got last year on projects. There's an enormous amount of paperwork and follow-up that's involved, and that Diane has just done a great job keeping that up, supported by the schools. School staff has been great. Light and Water also helped us on this year's, on the year 2 grant. So very happy to seemingly to have met the standard now for being able to apply for a year 3 grant.
Nice.
Year 3 grant that we have is for a total of $250,000 in funding. They're all school projects totaling $280,000 worth of projects, of which there's $30,000 in utility incentives available, brings it down to $250,000. What I think is one of the most interesting statistics here is that once these projects are implemented, which would be by the end of the calendar year, in order to apply for year 4 next year, the annual savings, in this case with the school department, will be $71,000 in reduced energy costs. So And we are, so those are the projects that
Trying to
we're-
make that appear in the spreadsheet.
Yeah. Well, it does, it shows in, it
No,
shows in,
the
it shows
school
in
budget
this,
one, I
it shows
mean.
in this column, but, you know, when we come to, but we're helping the schools to, you know,
Yes, I
reach
know,
that
I know.
equilibrium, so by cutting their expenses next year.
I love them, I mean it, but, you know.
So anyway, we are including some admin funds this year, which will help us get some consultant services in doing the reports. It's, for as great a job as staff has done, it's won them out, and we've got a lot of other things to do, and if we can get a state grant to do the paperwork on this and the monitoring, I think we'll be better off. Plus, then we can use the money to apply for next year's grant application as well, so.
Nice. Quick, make a motion.
Well, I have a question. I know we want to get out of here, but as far as the Green Communities grant is concerned, what involvement, if any, did the Sustainability Committee have in identifying the priorities or spending the money associated with it? It seems like a committee whose objective aligns reasonably well with what this grant is, and if we're not involving them, I'd at least like to involve them in a consultation role to.
Okay. On this one, it was largely staff generated to look at our list. I mean, it's a 5-year plan that sustainability had an awful lot to do with, to identify projects. We've been picking off that list. We've made some substitutions of buildings, but it's all buildings. It's all, which of our, you know, would it be and we're relying on input on which are the building projects that are most competitive, which are the ones that would actually get a competitive grant, and so I've been consulting with DOER, and I think most of the outreach work on this has been done by the school department. We've just been very impressed by all the work that Steve Mark and Dave Riley did. In going out and getting and bringing back proposals. So,
And as it stands, I agree with, going forward, one thing we can improve generally on, I know Cindy and I kind of touched on this, and we want to do more of that, is that all these little committees we create, you know, we want them to have value, you know, if they're gonna, you know, come in, even if they just come in and meet with staff and kick the tires on what you've done, and every third committee comes up with an odd idea that we hadn't thought of, it's worth it, you know, and even if they don't, the buy-in is there anyway, and there's value.
And that's principally what I'm, you know, and it does, you know, it doesn't have to be a big thing. I'm not asking for the Sustainability Committee to, you know, write next year's, although I suppose if they would be, that would be okay too. But to get that involvement and access that expertise could benefit us in the long run.
We'll certainly do that.
Makes sense. Entertain a motion.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to authorize submission to the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources of the Town of Littleton's Green Communities Year 3 grant application for energy reduction projects totaling up to $250,000, including...
Reading the alternate.
Revised.
Oh,
revised. You've got a copy of it, right?
You have it right here. It's on your desk.
Just kidding. Including VFD upgrades at the high school 7 and Shaker Lane 1, interior lighting upgrades at LHS Performing Arts Center, parking lot and building lighting at middle school, and administration.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much. So, 6B, we've got age-friendly community application, part of the Magic Subregion MAPC.
Yeah, the 13 towns of the Magic Subregion, along with the town of Westford, so a total of 14 have been working on a sort of a regional project to identify our area as an age-friendly area, and so we're looking to get all of those communities, including ours, to submit an application to the AARP, and Magic has provided us with a draft outline for Littleton's, Maren and Liz from the staff have both been working on this, and so we're bringing that to you tonight.
Yeah, so there are a lot of resources through the AARP network for seniors, and
There are some, a lot of it is brand, I think the value comes from branding, which we'll see what particular value we get from that, but to.
Kind of harsh and painful, isn't it, especially for a senior?
All right, so this has been done, we've executed this letter, we just need basically the board's, I'm trying to brush over, Mr. Clavey. We just need to make a motion so that we
You're hot, right.
saying that we,
Well, then I'll move that the Board of Selectmen vote to join its fellow towns of the MAGIC Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination and Subregion of MAPC and the neighboring town of Westford to create an age-friendly community and region by applying for membership in the AARP World Health Organization's global network of age-friendly cities and communities.
Second.
it's been moved and seconded, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, it's unanimous. Great, thank you very much. That Michael Festa is the director.
Oh, yeah.
I think you didn't know Mike.
Huh?
So you know
Oh, yeah.
Melrose Mike?
Yep.
Okay, so we are meeting again on
Tuesday. Next
Tuesday,
meeting is
joint
Tuesday.
meeting with
FinCom
FinCom
and
School Committee. And then our next scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting is on the 12th of March. So thank you very much, folks. Have a good night. Fruit